While I was on a 2-week fishing trip in Florida, my daughter sold my house to pay off her deadbeat husband's gambling debts. When I returned, they mocked me to my face, saying, "Now you are homeless, old man." I just smiled and asked, "What is so funny?" They snapped back, irritated by my calm. I replied that the house they sold was actually not mine to sell. I am Malik Jefferson. I am 70 years old. And for the last 40 years, I have been the man who built half the skyline of this district in Chicago. But to my daughter Keisha and her husband Brad, I am just a retired electrician living on a pension. Before I tell you how I sent them both to prison, please like and subscribe to the channel. Let me know in the comments where you are watching from. The Uber driver looked at me in the rearview mirror as we pulled up to the curb. It was late afternoon in the south side of Chicago, and the autumn wind was already carrying that sharp bite that warns you winter is coming. I tipped him $5, grabbed my suitcase, and stepped onto the pavement. My joints were stiff from the flight, but my spirit was high. 2 weeks of silence in the Florida Keys had been exactly what I needed. I walked up the concrete path I had poured myself 30 years ago. I looked up at my house. It was a 2-story Victorian painted a deep, dignified blue with white trim. It was worth $650,000 in today's market, but to me it was priceless. It was where my wife Beatrice and I had raised our daughter. It was the only thing I had left of my wife. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my keychain. The brass Yale key, worn smooth by decades of use, felt familiar in my thumb. I climbed the 3 wooden steps to the porch, ready to smell the old oak wood of the hallway. I slid the key into the lock. It did not go in. I frowned. I jiggled it. I thought perhaps some dirt had gotten into the mechanism. I pushed harder. Nothing. Metal hit metal with a dull thud. I leaned in closer, adjusting my glasses. My stomach dropped. This was not my lock. The old brass faceplate, scratched from years of missed aim in the dark, was gone. In its place was a shiny silver digital keypad with a brand name I did not recognize. A smart lock. I stepped back, looking at the door number. 421 Five Vine. Yes, this was my house. I looked at the window. The curtains were different. The beige drapes Beatrice had sewn were gone, replaced by cheap white vertical blinds. Confusion turned into a cold spike of adrenaline. I pounded on the door. "Is anyone in there?" I heard heavy footsteps, not the light trot of my daughter Keisha, who had a spare key. These were heavy boot-clad steps that shook the floorboards. The door swung open. Standing there was a man I had never seen in my life. He was white, about 6'4", with a neck as thick as a tree stump and tattoos creeping up from his collar to his chin. He wore a stained tank top and held a half-eaten sandwich. "Can I help you, old-timer?" I gripped the handle of my suitcase until my knuckles turned white. "Who are you? What are you doing in my house?" The man chewed slowly, looking me up and down. He saw an old black man in a fishing hat and a windbreaker. He saw a nobody. "Your house. Buddy, you better check your medication." "I bought this place 3 days ago. Now get off my porch before I call the cops." "You bought it. That is impossible. I am Malik Jefferson. I own this deed. I have lived here for 40 years. I did not sell anything." The man's eyes narrowed. He did not look like the type of man who negotiated. He looked like the type of man who broke things. "Look, pal, I bought this property cash from Shadow Creek LLC. I got the papers on the kitchen counter. Now I'm going to count to 3. If you are not on the sidewalk, I am going to remove you. I did not move. I have faced union strikes, corrupt inspectors, and job site accidents. I do not run from bullies. I am not going anywhere until I see those papers." The man sighed, wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, and reached behind the door frame. When his hand came back into view, he was holding a black lock pistol. He pointed it directly at my chest. 1. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. This was Southside Chicago. People got shot for less than a house dispute. 2. I backed down the stairs, hands raised. Okay, I am calling the police. Do it, he spat and slammed the door in my face. The sound of the deadbolt sliding home echoed like a gunshot. I stood on the sidewalk, my suitcase beside me, and dialed 911. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from a rage so hot it almost blinded me. Someone had sold my house. Someone had stolen my life while I was sitting on a boat in Key West. 10 minutes later, 2 cruisers pulled up. Blue and red lights flashed against the dusk. I waved them down. Officers, that man in there has a weapon, and he has broken into my home. The officers, 2 young men who looked like they hadn't been on the force long enough to shave, approached cautiously. They went to the door. They knocked. The big man opened it. The gun was gone. He was smiling now. Officers, thank God. This crazy old vagrant is trying to break in. He was banging on the door, screaming threats. I was terrified. I stepped forward. That is a lie. I live here. Sir, stay back. One officer barked, his hand resting on his holster. The man inside produced a folder. Here is the deed recorded with Cook County 3 days ago. Here is the bill of sale. Cash purchase. The officer took the papers. He scanned them. He looked at the man. Then he looked at me. He walked back down the steps. Sir, do you have identification? I handed him my driver's license. It listed this address. 4215 Martin Luther King Drive. See, it is my house. The officer shook his head. Sir, this ID just proves you used to live here. These papers show the house was sold on the 15th of this month. The new owner is Shadow Creek LLC, and this gentleman is their representative. I did not sell it, sir. If you believe that this is a civil matter, you need to take it up with the courts. But right now you are trespassing. You need to leave. I am not leaving. My clothes are in there. My wife's ashes are on the mantel. I tried to push past the officer. It was a mistake. Instinct took over. The officer grabbed my arm. I pulled back. Within seconds, I was spun around and slammed against the hood of the patrol car. The cold metal pressed against my cheek. I felt the steel cuffs snap around my wrists. You are under arrest for disorderly conduct and trespassing. I watched from the back of the squad car as the tattooed man stood on my porch, smirking. He waved a little goodbye as the police drove me away from the home I had built with my own hands. At the station, they left me in a holding cell for 3 hours. The bench was cold steel. The smell of bleach and old sweat filled the air. I sat there, my mind racing, trying to put the pieces together. Who could have done this? Finally, a desk sergeant called me up. He removed the cuffs. You are being released with a warning, Mr. Jefferson. But do not go back to that address tonight. The owner decides to press charges next time you are looking at jail time. He slid a photocopy across the desk here. The other party provided a copy of the sale contract for our report. You might want to look at it. I grabbed the paper. My eyes scanned the legal jargon until I reached the bottom of the page. There it was, my signature. Malik Jefferson. It looked exactly like my handwriting. The loops on the J, the sharp slant of the M. It was perfect. Next to it was a notary stamp dated 10 days ago. But 10 days ago, I was on a boat in the middle of the ocean. I looked at the seller's name. It wasn't just my name. There was a co-signer listed as power of attorney. Keisha Jefferson, my daughter. The paper shook in my hands. The room spun. Keisha, my little girl. The girl I put through private school. The girl I bought a car for when she turned 16. The girl whose tuition I paid in full so she would never know debt. She had signed this. She had used a power of attorney document. I remembered then. Last year I had emergency surgery for appendicitis. I was under heavy sedation. Kesha had brought papers. She said they were for the hospital admission for insurance. I had signed them groggy, trusting her. I trusted her with my life. I walked out of the police station into the freezing Chicago night. The wind cut through my thin windbreaker. I had my suitcase, my wallet, and the clothes on my back. That was it. I pulled out my phone. My fingers were stiff with cold. I dialed Keisha's number. It rang once, twice, 3 times. Then it went to voicemail. Hey, it's Kesha and Brad. We are living our best life right now. Leave a message. I hung up. I dialed again and again. On the 5th try, she answered. Her voice was hushed, annoyed. Dad, why are you calling so much? It is late. Keisha? I am outside the police station. A stranger is in my house. He says you sold it. There was a long silence on the other end. Then I heard Brad, my son-in-law, laughing in the background. Dad, look. We had to do it. Brad was in trouble, real trouble. You sold my house. You forged my signature. I used the power of attorney. Dad, it is legal. You signed it. That was for medical decisions only. Well, the fine print said financial too. Look, Dad, don't be dramatic. You have your pension. You can go to a senior center. They have beds there. A senior center. I am not invalid. I am a wealthy man, though you do not know it. But in that moment, standing on the curb, I felt small. I felt old. Kesha, tell me you did not throw your mother's ashes away. I heard Brad's voice come closer to the phone. Hey, old man, stop harassing my wife. You are homeless now. Deal with it. If you want to sleep on our couch, it is $500 a week. Otherwise, find a bridge. The line went dead. I stood there looking at the dark screen of my phone. A snowflake landed on the glass and melted. They thought I was a helpless old retiree. They thought they had stripped me of everything. They thought the game was over. I put the phone in my pocket. I straightened my back. The cold didn't bother me anymore. The rage was keeping me warm. I walked to the curb and hailed a cab. Where to, pal? Take me to the downtown Hyatt, I said. That is pricey, the driver warned, looking at my fishing hat. I pulled out a roll of $100 bills from my secret travel stash inside my jacket. Just drive. As we merged onto the highway, I looked out at the city lights. I was not going to a senior center. I was going to war. And tomorrow morning, Kesha and Brad were going to learn that they didn't just sell a house. They sold their own future. I stood in the hallway of the crumbling brick building on 63rd Street. The smell of stale cigarettes and boiled cabbage hung in the air like a thick fog. The fluorescent light above me flickered with a dying buzz. This was where my daughter lived. It was a far cry from the Victorian home I had provided for her growing up. And it was a sharp contrast to the luxury hotel suite I could have afforded. But I was not here for luxury. I was here for answers. I knocked on the door marked 4B. The paint was peeling, revealing rusted metal underneath. Inside, I heard the muffled sounds of explosions and gunfire from a video game. I knocked again, harder this time. The door opened. Keisha stood there. She was wearing a silk robe that I recognized instantly. It was a deep purple robe I had bought for her mother Beatrice 10 years ago for our anniversary. Seeing it on her, knowing she must have raided my closets while I was gone, made my bile rise in my throat. She looked at me, and for a second I saw fear, but then her eyes hardened. Dad, you are here. I did not wait for an invitation. I pushed past her into the apartment. The air inside was hot and smelled of grease. The living room was a chaotic mess of takeout boxes, empty beer bottles, and dirty laundry. But in the center of the filth sat a pristine, brand new leather sectional sofa. It still had the plastic tags on the legs. And there he was, Brad, my son-in-law. He was sprawled across the new sofa, a controller in his hand, his feet propped up on a coffee table that was stained with water rings. He did not stand up. He did not pause his game. He took a bite of a pepperoni pizza slice, chewing with his mouth open, his eyes fixed on the television screen. Hey, Malik, took you long enough. I stood over him, my shadow blocking the light from the TV. Turn it off. Brad's side dropped the controller on the cushion and looked up at me with a smirk that made my hands itch. You are ruining my kill streak, old man. What do you want? I want to know why a stranger is living in my house. I want to know why the police have a bill of sale with my signature on it. Kesha walked into the room, tying the robe tighter around herself. She did not look at me. She looked at the floor, then at Brad, seeking his approval. We had to do it, Dad. We had no choice. There is always a choice, Kesha. You stole my home. It was not stealing. Brad interrupted, picking a piece of pepperoni out of his teeth. It was asset liquidation. I was in a bind, Malik. Serious, guys. They wanted $200,000 or they were going to break my legs. Maybe worse. What was I supposed to do? Let them kill your daughter's husband. I looked at him, at his soft hands that had never held a hammer, at his arrogant face. I would have preferred that outcome, I said coldly. Kesha gasped. Dad, how can you say that I can say it because I worked 40 years for that house? I poured the foundation. I framed the walls. I paid every mortgage bill, and you sold it for cash to a stranger while I was on vacation. We saved your life too, Brad said, leaning back. Those guys would have come for the whole family eventually. You should be thanking me. I ignored him and turned to my daughter. How did you do it, Keisha? The deed requires my signature. The notary requires my presence. She finally looked at me. Her eyes were defiant, but I could see the guilt swimming underneath. The power of attorney, Dad, the one you signed last year. My mind raced back to the hospital. The appendicitis, the pain, the fog of anesthesia. Kesha had come in with a stack of papers. She said they were standard hospital forms, insurance waivers, consent for treatment. I had signed them all, my hand shaking, my vision blurry. That was for medical decisions. I said, my voice rising. It was limited. It expired when I left the hospital. Brad laughed. A low, cruel sound. You really should read the fine print, Pops. That document gave Keisha full control over your assets, your property, and your finances, and the expiration date. Well, let us just say you were a little hazy on the dates when you signed it. It is valid, Malik, ironclad. I stared at them. This was not just a desperate act to pay a debt. This was a setup. They had been planning this. They had waited for a moment of weakness, a moment of trust, and they had weaponized it. You manipulated me, I said. You took advantage of me when I was sick. Brad stood up then. He was taller than me, younger, but he had the posture of a man who had never carried a heavy load. He got in my face, smelling of garlic and old sweat. Watch your mouth, old man. Nobody manipulated you. You were just getting old. Your memory is slipping. The doctor said the anesthesia might have lingering effects on a geriatric brain. Maybe you just forgot what you signed. Maybe you are losing it. Gaslighting. I knew the term. I had seen it on the news. But feeling it, having my own reality twisted by this man, was a different kind of violence. He was trying to make me doubt my own mind. He was trying to paint me as senile to cover his crimes. I remember perfectly, I said, keeping my voice steady. I remember you were not even at the hospital, Brad. You were too busy betting on horses. Brad's face turned red. He shoved me. It was a light shove, not enough to knock me down, but enough to show disrespect. You were confused, Malik, just like you were confused about the house. But here's the reality check you need. You do not have a house anymore. You do not have a car because we sold that this morning too. You do not have savings because Keisha drained the joint account to pay off the interest on my loans. I looked at Keisha. She turned away. You took the retirement fund. We needed it, she whispered. That was $50,000, Keisha. That was for emergencies. This was an emergency. She snapped. God, why are you being so selfish? We are young. We have a life to live. You are 70 years old. What do you need money for? You're just going to die soon anyway. The words hung in the air, thick, heavy, poisonous. So that is it, I said. I am just a waiting room for your inheritance. Brad clapped his hands together, breaking the tension. Look, let us not get dramatic. We are not monsters. We are family. And because we are family, we are not going to leave you on the street. He gestured grandly to the sofa he had just vacated. We have a proposition for you. Since you are homeless now, and since you clearly cannot manage your own affairs without getting confused, you can stay here in this apartment on the couch, Brad corrected. We do not have a spare room, but this is a high-quality leather sofa. Cost me $3,000. Very comfortable. I looked at the couch. It was covered in crumbs. And Brad continued, his eyes gleaming with greed. We cannot have you mooching off us. We have expenses, so we will rent you this spot. $500 a week, $500. That was nearly my entire monthly pension check. That is robbery, I said. That is the market rate for a furnished space in this economy. Brad smirked. Plus, we are providing food. Well, whatever we eat and laundry services. Kesha can wash your clothes when she does ours. I looked at Kesha. She was my flesh and blood. I remembered holding her when she was born. I remembered teaching her to ride a bike. I remembered paying for her wedding to this man, even though I knew he was no good. You were going to charge your father rent to sleep on a couch after you sold his house. Keisha crossed her arms. We have to be practical, Dad. Brad is right. You have a pension coming in every month. You do not have a mortgage anymore. What else are you going to spend it on? We will set up a direct deposit, Brad added. It will come straight to us. That way you do not have to worry about handling money. Less stress for your brain. I stood there looking at them. I saw them for what they truly were. Not a daughter and a son-in-law in trouble, but predators. Vultures picking at the bones of a life they thought was over. They thought I was trapped. They thought I was a senile, helpless old man with nowhere to go. They thought they had won. If I walked out that door right now, I could go to my lawyer. I could freeze everything. I could bring down the full weight of the law on them. But if I did that, they might run. They might hide the money they had left. Or worse, they might play the victim to the court's claim I was mentally incompetent and use the very documents they forged to lock me away in a facility. No, I needed more. I needed undeniable proof of their cruelty. I needed to witness their crimes up close. I needed them to believe I was exactly what they said. I was weak, broken, and compliant. I lowered my head. I let my shoulders slump. I let my hands tremble slightly. I forced myself to look defeated. Okay, I whispered. Brad's smile widened into a grin. Okay, what? Okay, I will stay. I have nowhere else to go. Smart choice, Malik, Brad said, patting me on the shoulder hard. Welcome home. He grabbed his slice of pizza and sat back down on the couch right next to where I was standing. Now move out of the way. You are blocking the screen. I moved to the corner of the room. I sat on a hard wooden dining chair. I watched them. Kesha went into the kitchen and started making a drink. Brad yelled at the TV. They ignored me completely. I sat there in silence. My face a mask of sorrow. But behind my glasses, my eyes were dry and sharp. I was calculating. I was memorizing. They wanted a homeless old man. I would give them one. I would be the best roommate they ever had. I would clean their floors. I would wash their clothes. I would listen to their conversations. I would watch where they hid their papers. I would learn every password, every PIN number, every secret they thought they were keeping from the senile old man on the couch. You want $500 a week, Brad? I thought to myself, I will give it to you, but you are going to pay for every single cent with your freedom. I leaned my head back against the wall and closed my eyes, feigning sleep. But I was wide awake. The construction of their downfall had just begun, and I was the foreman. I woke up before the sun had a chance to touch the skyline of Chicago. My back was screaming in protest against the lumpy cushions of Brad's leather sofa. The apartment was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional siren wailing in the distance. I folded the scratchy blanket they had given me and placed it neatly on the armrest. I was not a guest here. I was an inmate, and inmates have to follow the rules until they figure out how to break out. I slipped out of the apartment without making a sound. The morning air was crisp and smelled of exhaust and damp concrete. I walked 6 blocks to the bus stop. My destination was the Cook County Recorder of Deeds office downtown. I needed to see the paperwork with my own eyes. I needed to see the crime scene on paper. The office was a cavernous room filled with rows of computers and people looking for answers they usually did not want to find. I took a ticket and waited. When my number was called, I walked up to the clerk. She looked tired, sipping a large coffee, her eyes glazed over. I need to see the recent transaction history for the property at 4215 Martin Luther King Drive, I said. She typed the address into her system. Her keystrokes sounded like gunfire in the quiet room. Here it is, she said, turning the monitor slightly. Quick claim deed. Recorded 3 days ago. I leaned in. I saw the image of the document scanned into the system. Girder Malik Jefferson Grant, Shadow Creek, LLC. And there at the bottom was the signature, my name signed by Keisha Jefferson as power of attorney. I asked the clerk to print it. I paid the fee with the cash I had hidden in my shoe. I took the warm pages to a table in the corner and sat down. I stared at the numbers. The sale price was listed clearly on the transfer tax declaration, $350,000. I felt a cold rage settle in my stomach. It was heavier than the breakfast I'd skipped, $350,000. That house was appraised at $650,000 last year. The woodwork alone, which I had restored by hand, was worth a fortune. The location was prime, right in the path of the new university expansion. Developers had been knocking on my door for 5 years, offering me $600,000 cash, and Keisha sold it for half its value. This was not a market sale. This was a fire sale. This was a panic move. No legitimate buyer gets a house for 50 cents on the dollar unless the seller is desperate or the buyer is a criminal. Shadow Creek, LLC. I memorized the name. This confirmed what Brad had said about being in trouble. He did not just sell my house to pay a debt. He gave my house away to save his own skin. He handed over my life's work to a shark for the price of a minnow. I looked at the date on the deed. It was signed the day after I left for Florida. They had not waited a week. They had not waited a day. They had waited until my plane was in the air. I folded the papers and put them in my inside jacket pocket. They were the first brick in the wall I was going to build around them. My next stop was the bank. I walked 10 blocks to the branch where I'd kept my accounts for 30 years. I knew the manager, Mr. Henderson, but I avoided his office. I did not want him to see me like this, unshaven and wearing wrinkled clothes. I went to the teller line. I need a statement for my savings account, I told the young woman behind the glass. And I need a history of withdrawals for the last 60 days. She asked for my ID and typed in my account number. Her eyebrows shot up. She looked at the screen, then at me, then back at the screen, sir. She said, her voice dropping to a whisper. Is everything okay? Just give me the numbers, I said. She printed the statement and slid it under the glass. I picked it up. Balance, $1,245. I stared at the number. $12. I had worked since I was 18 years old. I had saved. I had invested. I had put $50,000 into that liquid savings account for emergencies. It was my safety net. It was the money for a new roof, for medical bills, for a rainy day. And now it was gone. I ran my finger down the transaction list. It was a massacre. ATM withdrawal, $500. ATM withdrawal, $500. It went on for pages. Starting 2 months ago, every single day, the maximum daily limit had been pulled out. 500 here, 800 there. Cash back at grocery stores, cash back at gas stations. Kesha, she had my debit card number. I had given it to her once years ago to buy groceries when Beatrice was sick. She had kept it. She had waited. She had, while I was recovering from surgery, drugged and vulnerable. She must have taken the card from my wallet and cloned it. Or maybe she just wrote down the numbers. It did not matter how. What mattered was the consistency. She did not drain it all at once. That would have triggered a fraud alert. She bled me dry slowly. Day by day, like a parasite, I looked at the dates. The withdrawals accelerated 2 weeks ago, right before I left for Florida. They knew they were going to sell the house. They knew I would find out. So they decided to take everything before the bridge burned down. They left me $12. That was not even enough for a cab ride back to the hellhole they called home. I thanked the teller and walked out. The wind had picked up, whipping down the concrete canyons of the city. I felt light, untethered. I had no home. I had no cash savings. I had a suitcase of clothes and a burning hatred that was keeping me upright. I walked until my legs ached. I ended up in Millennium Park. It was full of tourists taking pictures of the sculpture they call the Bean. They were laughing, holding hands, living their lives. I found a bench away from the crowd under a tree that was losing its leaves. I bought a hot dog from a vendor with a few crumpled bills from my pocket. It tasted like salt and ash. I ate it slowly, chewing every bite, forcing myself to fuel the machine. I needed energy. I needed clarity. I sat there for an hour watching the city move. I looked at the skyscrapers in the distance. I knew the steel inside them. I knew the concrete foundations. I knew how things were built, and I knew how to take them down. Kesha and Brad thought they were dealing with a retired electrician. They thought my power ended at the circuit breaker box. They did not know about Jefferson Construction. They did not know about the shell companies. They did not know that for 20 years I was the general contractor for some of the biggest commercial projects in the South Side. I had dissolved the company 10 years ago when Beatrice got sick, but I never dissolved the connections and I never dissolved the intelligence. I reached into the lining of my suitcase and pulled out a second phone. It was an old BlackBerry, sturdy as a brick. I kept it charged. I kept it hidden. It was for business. Real business. I powered it on. The screen glowed green. I scrolled through the contacts until I found the name I needed. Desmond Clark. Desmond was the best real estate attorney in Chicago. He was ruthless, brilliant, and expensive. He was also the only man who knew exactly how much I was worth. He had set up my estate planning. He had structured the trusts. I pressed the call button. It rang twice. "This is Clark." A deep, smooth voice answered. "Desmond, it is Malik." There was a pause. Then the tone changed. It became warmer, respectful. "Malik, I have not heard from you since the Christmas card. How is the fishing in Florida?" "The fishing was fine, Desmond. The coming home part, not so much. I need to see you today." Desmond did not ask questions. He did not ask why. He knew me. If I was calling on this line on a Wednesday afternoon, the sky was falling. "I have a slot at 2:00. Come to the office or I can send a car." "No car," I said. "I do not want anyone seeing me in a luxury vehicle. I will come to you." But Desmond pulled the file on the Malik Jefferson Irrevocable Trust and pull the file on the property at 4255 Martin Luther King Drive. I heard the sound of a pen scratching on paper. "Is there a problem with the property, Malik? My daughter sold it," I said. Silence. A long, heavy silence. Malik, Desmond said slowly. "That is impossible." "I know," I replied, "but she thinks she did. And the man living in my living room thinks she did." "I see," Desmond said. His voice was cold now, sharp, legal. "I will have the files on my desk when you get here." "Malik, are you safe?" "I am sitting on a park bench eating a $2 hot dog." "Desmond, I am perfectly safe. It is my son-in-law who is in danger. He just does not know it yet." I hung up the phone. I finished the last bite of the hot dog. I wiped my mouth with a paper napkin. I looked at the reflection of the city in the giant silver sculpture. I looked small. I looked like an old man in a fishing hat. Good. Let them see an old man. Let Brad see a victim. Let Kesha see a burden. They had taken my house. They had taken my cash. But they had made a fatal error. They assumed the house belonged to me, but it didn't. I stood up and brushed the crumbs from my lap. It was time to go to work. I had a meeting with a shark, and we were going to smell blood in the water. I waited on the corner of Michigan Avenue and Monroe precisely at 2:0. A black Mercedes Maybach pulled up to the curb, its tinted windows reflecting the gray Chicago sky. The rear door clicked open. I slid inside. The interior smelled of rich leather and expensive cologne, a stark contrast to the smell of old grease that clung to my jacket from Brad's apartment. Desmond Clark sat on the other side of the cabin. He was 50 years old, wearing a bespoke suit that cost more than most people's cars. He did not look at my fishing hat or my wrinkled windbreaker. He looked me in the eye. He held out a hand. "Mick, it has been too long?" I shook his hand. His grip was firm. Desmond was one of the few men in this city who knew the man behind the pensioner disguise. He knew that before I retired, Jefferson Construction had poured the concrete for the very building we were parked in front of. "I did not come here for pleasantries, Desmond." "I need to know who bought my house?" Desmond nodded. He reached into a leather briefcase and pulled out a thick blue folder. He slid it across the center console. "We ran a background check on Shadow Creek LLC. It is a shell company. Malik registered in Delaware, but the money trails back to a group operating out of a warehouse in the meatpacking district." He opened the file. There were photos of men I did not recognize, grainy surveillance shots. They are an Eastern European gambling syndicate. They run high-stakes sports betting and loan sharking operations. I looked at the photos. These were not real estate investors. These were leg breakers. So Brad was telling the truth about one thing I said. He was in trouble. Desmond tapped a photo of a man with a scar running down his cheek. "Your son-in-law owes them $200,000. He lost it betting on college football and some cryptocurrency scheme that went bust. Shadow Creek LLC didn't buy your house because they wanted the architecture. They took it as payment, a liquidation of assets to cover a bad debt." I felt a cold shiver. My home, the place where Beatrice had planted her roses, the place where I had built the nursery. It was just a poker chip to them. They threatened to kill him, didn't they? "That is their standard operating procedure," Desmond said. Brad panicked. He needed an asset to trade. He offered them the house. They probably gave him a value of $350,000 to clear the debt and the interest, and they paid him the difference in cash to keep him quiet. That explains why he has a new sofa, and you are sleeping on it. I closed the file. My hands were steady. "So they have the house. They have the deed." Desmond smiled. Then it was a shark's smile. Cold, sharp, dangerous. "That is the interesting part, Malik. They think they have the deed. They have a piece of paper signed by Kesha Jefferson as power of attorney for Malik Jefferson. Yes, she forged the date on the POA. It does not matter if the date was valid or not," Desmond said. He leaned forward, his voice dropping an octave. "Kesha had the authority to sign for Malik Jefferson. But Malik Jefferson does not own the house at 4215 Martin Luther King Drive." I looked at him for a second. I was confused. Then the memory hit me. 10 years ago, Beatrice was dying. We sat in this very office. I wanted to protect everything we had built. I wanted to make sure that no matter what happened to my business, no matter what lawsuits came from the construction sites, our home would be safe. "The trust," I whispered. Desmond nodded. "The Beatrice Jefferson Irrevocable Trust. We moved the title into the trust a decade ago. You are the trustee, Malik, but you are not the owner. The trust is a separate legal entity. To sell that house, you need the seal of the trust and a specific deed of transfer from the trust itself. Kesha signed a quit-claim deed from you personally. I sat back against the leather seat. A laugh bubbled up in my chest. It was a dark, dry sound. She sold them nothing. She sold them air. Desmond confirmed she committed fraud. Brad committed fraud. And Shadow Creek LLC, for all their criminal sophistication, got lazy. They didn't run a full title search because it was an off-market cash deal to cover a criminal debt. They assumed the name on the mailbox was the name on the title. I looked out the window at the busy street. People were rushing by, oblivious. So I can kick them out. I can call the police right now and tell them the deed is void. Desmond paused. He poured a glass of water from a crystal carafe and handed it to me. Legally, yes. We can file an emergency injunction. We can prove the title never transferred. We can have the sheriff evict Shadow Creek's goons by Friday, and we can have Keisha and Brad arrested for fraud and forgery. He watched me carefully. Is that what you want, Malik, a quick victory? I took a sip of the water. It was cool and clean. I thought about Brad on the sofa eating pizza while I stood in the corner. I thought about Kesha wearing her mother's robe. I thought about the $500 a week they wanted to charge me. If I arrest them now, I said slowly, they will claim it was a mistake. They will claim they didn't know about the trust. They will play the victims. They will say they were under duress from the mob. A soft judge might give them probation. Desmond nodded. And you will have your house back, but you will still have a daughter who betrayed you and a son-in-law who sees you as a piggy bank. I crushed the paper cup in my hand. No, that is not enough. Desmond opened another file. This one was thinner. I took the liberty of pulling the financials on your dormant construction holdings. You have $3 million in liquid assets sitting in the corporate accounts of Jefferson Holdings. You have 5 commercial properties in the loop generating $40,000 a month in rent, and the Beatrick Trust has a balance of $200,000 in bonds. He looked at me. You are a wealthy man, Malik. You could buy 10 houses. You could move to an island. Why are you wearing that windbreaker? Because I wanted them to be decent people, I said. I wanted them to build their own lives. I hid the money so they would learn the value of work. Clearly, I failed. You did not fail. Desmond said, you were generous. They were greedy. So what is the play? I do not want to sue them yet. I want to wait. Wait for what I want them to dig the hole deeper. I want them to commit crimes that probation cannot fix. Desmond tapped his pen on the leather armrest. If you go back there, Malik, you are putting yourself in a hostile environment. Brad is desperate. He thinks he is in the clear, but he has money now. Bad money. He will be volatile. I am not afraid of Brad. I have handled union enforcers tougher than him. I need evidence, Desmond. The forgery is good. The fraud is good. But I want them for elder abuse. I want them for coercion. I want to show the world exactly who they are. Desmond pulled a small black device from his briefcase. It looked like a car key fob. This is a high-D audio recorder. It has a 50-hour battery life. It uploads to the cloud whenever it hits a Wi-Fi signal. He handed it to me. If you are going back into the lion's den, take this. I pocketed the device. I am going back. They think I am a homeless old man. I am going to play the part. I am going to be the pathetic, confused father-in-law. I will wash their dishes. I will sleep in their basement. And I will record every word they say. Desmond looked worried. Malik, the house. Shadow Creek is not going to just sit on it. They are developers in their own way. They flip properties. They cannot sell it without clear title. I said no, but they can renovate it. They can gut it. Let them try. I said the house is in a historic preservation district. Beatrice made sure of that 10 years ago. You cannot change a door orc knob without a permit from the city. And since they are not the legal owners, they cannot get a permit. Desmond grinned. So if they touch the structure, it is a felony destruction of historic property, I finished. And the city can seize the construction equipment. You are a cold man, Malik Jefferson. I learned from the best, I said, nodding at him. I opened the door of the Mercedes. The cold air rushed in. Desmond, keep the files ready. When I give the signal, I want you to drop the sky on them. I want the bank accounts frozen. I want the credit cards traced. I want the trust documents filed with the district attorney. Consider it done. Be careful, Malik. Brad is stupid, and stupid men are dangerous. I stepped out onto the curb. I am counting on it, I said. I watched the black car slide away into the traffic. I adjusted my fishing hat. I hunched my shoulders. I put a tremor in my hand. It was time to go home, or at least to the place they called home. I took a bus back to the south side. I stopped at a liquor store and bought a cheap bottle of whiskey, pouring half of it out in the alley and splashing a little on my shirt. I needed to smell like defeat. I needed to smell like a man who had given up. When I knocked on the door of apartment 4B, Brad opened it. He was wearing a new watch. Gold gaudy. Look who is back. He sneered. Did you find a bridge, or do you have my rent money? I held out the cash I had withdrawn from the bank. $500. I found an ATM, I mumbled, keeping my eyes on the floor. It is all I have left for the week. Brad snatched the bills from my hand. Welcome back to luxury, Malik. Try not to snore tonight. He let me in. I walked past him, dragging my feet. I saw Kesha in the kitchen cooking steaks, ribeyes, thick ones. We're celebrating, she said, not looking at me. Brad made some smart investments. I bet he did, I thought. I went to the couch and sat down. I slipped my hand into my pocket and pressed the button on the recorder. The little red light blinked once unseen inside the fabric. I was in. The trap was set, and they were already walking right into it. The leather sofa lasted exactly one night. By the next morning, Brad decided that my presence in the living room was ruining the aesthetic of his new life. He woke me up by kicking the sole of my foot. Get up, Malik. We need the room. You were going downstairs. Downstairs meant the basement. In these old Chicago 2 flats, the basement is not a finished rec room. It is a utility space. It is where the furnace lives. It is where the concrete floor sweats moisture, even in the winter. It is dark. It smells of mold and rust. And it is cold enough to see your breath. I gathered my blanket and my suitcase. I did not argue. Arguments require energy, and I was saving mine for something more important. I followed Brad to the narrow wooden stairs that led into the dark. Here is your new suite. Brad laughed, flipping a switch that turned on a single naked bulb hanging from a wire. Don't touch the furnace and keep out of the boxes in the corner. That is my inventory. He pointed to a stack of cardboard boxes labeled with various electronics brands. Probably stolen, probably another scheme. Before I could step down, Brad held out his hand. Phone. I looked at him. I need to make calls, Brad. I have doctors. You have nothing. Brad snapped. You are indigent. You are a dependent, and I do not want you calling social services or crying to the neighbors. Hand it over, or you can sleep outside in the alley. I hesitated just long enough to make it look real. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the smartphone I had used to call Kesha from the police station. It was a standard model, nothing special. It was not the encrypted BlackBerry Desmond had given me. That was taped securely to the inside of my thigh under my trousers. I handed him the phone. Brad snatched it and shoved it into his back pocket. For your own good old man. We cannot have you getting confused and calling 911 because you forgot where you live. He slammed the door at the top of the stairs. I heard the lock turn. I was a prisoner in the foundation of a building I could have bought 10 times over. I set my suitcase on an old wooden pallet to keep it off the damp floor. I made a bed using a pile of old curtains I found in a plastic bin. It was humiliating. It was degrading, but it was also perfect. Being invisible is a superpower. And down here I was a ghost. But ghosts still have to work. 2 hours later, the door opened. Keisha stood there holding a plastic laundry basket overflowing with clothes. She would not look me in the eye. Brad says, "You have to earn your keep, Dad, since you are not paying rent this week." She dumped the basket down the stairs. Clothes tumbled down the steps, landing in a heap at my feet on the dirty concrete. "Wash them by hand," she said, her voice devoid of emotion. "The machine uses too much electricity. There is a utility sink in the corner. Use the scrub board." I looked at the pile. It was mostly Brad's clothes. Greasy t-shirts, muddy jeans, and his underwear. Stained, filthy underwear. "Keisha," I said softly. "I am 70 years old. My arthritis. Just do it, Dad. Please do not make him angry." She closed the door. I walked over to the utility sink. It was made of stone stained with decades of paint and chemicals. The water from the tap came out freezing cold. There was no hot water line down here. I rolled up my sleeves. I plunged my hands into the icy water. I picked up a pair of my son-in-law's boxers. I scrubbed until my knuckles were raw and red. I scrubbed until I could not feel my fingers. I washed away the filth of a man who was stealing my future. Every scrub was a deposit in the bank of my rage. Every time I wrung out a shirt, I imagined I was wringing out the lies he had told. I hung the wet clothes on the exposed pipes running along the ceiling. The basement filled with the smell of wet cotton and cheap detergent. When I was finished, the door opened again. Brad came down this time. He was holding a bucket and a mop floors. He barked all of them, kitchen, hallway, living room, and do not miss the corners. He marched me upstairs. The apartment floor was cheap laminate that was peeling at the edges, but Brad treated it like Italian marble. "Get on your knees, Malik. You miss a spot, you do it again." I got down on my knees. My joints popped. A sharp pain shot up my back. I dipped the rag into the bucket of gray water and began to wipe. I crawled across the floor inch by inch. I cleaned under the table where they ate. I cleaned around the TV stand where Brad played his games. I cleaned the mud from his boots that he left by the door. Kesha was sitting at the kitchen table scrolling through her phone. She was drinking a glass of wine. My wine from the collection I kept in the cellar of the house they sold. She saw me crawling. She saw her father, the man who had carried her on his shoulders, wiping the floor like a servant. She took a sip of wine and turned her page. She did not say a word. She did not offer to help. She did not even look embarrassed anymore. She had accepted this new reality. I was no longer her father. I was just a thing that took up space. I reached the spot near the sofa where Brad was sitting. He lifted his feet so I could wipe underneath. "You missed a spot," he said. I looked. The floor was clean. "It looks clean to me, Brad," he smirked. He reached out with his foot and kicked the bucket. Filthy gray water splashed across the floor I had just dried. It soaked into my pants. It spread in a dark puddle across the laminate. "Whoops," Brad laughed. "Clumsy old man. Look at the mess you made. Clean it up and do it right this time, or you do not eat tonight." I froze. The water was cold on my skin. The humiliation burned hot in my chest. I looked at Keisha. She paused the glass halfway to her lips. For a second, I thought she would speak. I thought she would scream. I thought she would remember who I was. She looked at the puddle. Then she looked at me. "You hurt him, Dad?" she said quietly. "Clean it up." I lowered my head. I dipped the rag into the spilled water. I wrung it out into the bucket. I wiped the floor again. I did not look at them. I could not. If I looked at them, they would see the fire in my eyes. They would see that the old man on his knees was not broken. He was just waiting. That night, they gave me a sandwich with one slice of bologna and sent me back to the basement. I ate it in the dark, sitting on my suitcase. It was midnight when the voices started. The basement ceiling was thin, just subflooring and laminate, and the old heating ducts acted like a microphone carrying sound from the living room directly down to where I sat. I heard Brad pacing. I heard the heavy thud of his boots. I heard the beep of a phone dialing. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the high-definition recorder Desmond had given me. I pressed the button. The tiny red light blinked in the darkness. Yeah, it is done. Brad's voice came through the ceiling clear and loud. He was talking to someone. His tone was different. Bragging manic. I told you I was good for it, Yuri. The house is sold. 350 large. The transfer went through 3 days ago. Check the county records if you do not believe me. Pause. Yeah, I know the interest was high, but I got the cash. I am going to wire you the $200 tomorrow morning. That clears the slate, right? We are square. I listened, holding my breath. He was confirming the debt. He was confirming the sale. He was talking to the loan shark. Then his voice dropped, but the excitement ratcheted up. But listen. I am not sending you everything. I have got a 150 left over. Yeah, and I got a tip. A real insider tip. There is this new coin launching on Tuesday. Titan coin. My buddy says it is going to moon. It is a guaranteed 10x return in 24 hours. I shook my head in the dark. He was an addict. He had just committed a major felony to clear a life-threatening debt, and he was already planning to gamble the surplus. I am going all in, Yuri. I am putting the whole 150 on it. I will turn that into $1.5 million by Friday. Then I will pay you off, buy a mansion, and dump this dump. Pause. The old man he is here. He is sleeping in the basement like a rat. Yeah, he has no clue. He thinks he signed medical papers. He is senile. I got him scrubbing floors. It is hilarious. My grip tightened on the recorder. No, he is not a problem. He has no money, no phone, no car. He is invisible. Once I hit big on this coin, I will drop him off at a state shelter and change the locks. He won't last a winter. Brad laughed. It was the laugh of a man who thought he was untouchable. All right, I will see you tomorrow for the drop. And Yuri put me down for 10 grand on the Bears game too. I feel lucky. He hung up. I heard him walk to the kitchen. I heard the fridge open. I heard a beer crack. I stopped the recording. I saved the file. I sat there in the cold, the sound of his laughter still echoing in my ears. He was going to gamble the money. The money he got from selling a house he didn't own. This was it. This was the mistake Desmond had predicted. If Brad wired that money to a crypto exchange, it became wire fraud. If he moved it across state lines, it was federal. And since the house actually belonged to the Beatrick Trust, he was embezzling from a legal entity. He was digging a hole so deep, he would never see the sun again. I lay back on my makeshift bed of curtains. The floor was hard, and the air was freezing, but I felt warm. Go ahead, Brad, I whispered to the dark ceiling. Feel lucky. Bet it all, because I am the one holding the deck, and you are about to draw the dead man's hand. It was Tuesday morning when the sky finally fell on Brad. I was in the basement folding the laundry I'd washed by hand the night before. The damp cold of the concrete floor seeped through my shoes, but I barely noticed it anymore. I had become part of the basement. I was just another piece of discarded furniture stored in the dark. Suddenly a scream tore through the ceiling above my head. It was not a scream of pain. It was a scream of pure, unadulterated panic. It is gone. It is all gone. I heard the sound of something heavy hitting the wall, probably a chair. Then came the sound of breaking glass. I stopped folding. I stood perfectly still under the heating duct, letting the voices drift down to me. What do you mean it is gone? That was Kesha's voice. She sounded shrill, terrified. It was a rug pull, Keisha. A scam. The developers dumped their wallets. Titan Coin is trading at zero. It is zero. I allowed myself a small, cold smile in the darkness. The $150,000. The surplus money from selling my house. The money Brad was going to use to buy a mansion and kick me to the curb. It had evaporated into the digital ether in seconds. You put everything in it. Kesha screamed. You said you were going to diversify. I thought it was a sure thing. Brad roared back. His voice was cracking. I wanted to double it. I wanted to get us out of here. And now what? We have nothing. We paid Yuri, but we have nothing left for rent. We have nothing for food. We sold the car. We sold his house. We have zero cash, Brad. I heard pacing. Heavy, frantic footsteps stomping back and forth across the laminate floor above. I need liquidity. Brad was muttering. I need a stake. If I can just get $5,000, I can put it on the Lakers game tonight. I have a lock. I can make it back. I just need a starting pot. He was an addict. He had just lost a fortune. And his first instinct was not to get a job. It was to gamble again. He was spiraling, and he was going to take everyone down with him. What can we sell? Kesha asked. Her voice was desperate. The TV. I already pawned the good one yesterday to buy the dip, Brad snapped. We have nothing. This place is empty. Silence fell for a moment. Then I heard Brad's footsteps stop directly above where I was standing. Wait, the watch! What the old man on his wrist? He wears that old Rolex, the stainless steel one with the black face. I instinctively covered my left wrist with my right hand. The watch, it was a 1970 Rolex Submariner. Beatrice had saved for 3 years to buy it for me when I started my construction company. It was the first thing of value we ever owned. I had worn it every day for 40 years. It was scratched. It was faded. But to collectors, it was worth $15,000, maybe $20,000. It was not just a watch. It was Beatrice. It was her faith in me. He still has it, Kesha asked. Yeah, he never takes it off. That thing is vintage. It is worth $10,000 easy, maybe more. That is my stake. That is how I get us back in the game. I heard them moving toward the basement door. I looked around. There was nowhere to hide. There was nowhere to run. I was a 70-year-old man trapped in a concrete box with 2 desperate predators coming down the stairs. The door flew open. Light from the hallway spilled down the steps, blinding me for a second. Brad came down first, taking the steps 2 at a time. Keisha followed close behind him. Brad's eyes were wild. He was sweating. He looked like a cornered animal. Give it to me, Malik. He did not call me Dad. He did not call me by my name. He just held out his hand palm up, demanding. I stepped back until my back hit the cold brick wall. Give you what, Brad? The watch. The Rolex. Take it off. I covered the watch with my other hand. My heart was hammering against my ribs, but my voice was steady. No. Brad blinked. He was not used to me saying no. He was used to the beaten-down old man who scrubbed his floors. What did you say to me? I said, no, this watch was a gift from my wife. It is the only thing I have left of her. You took my house. You took my savings. You took my dignity. You are not taking this. Kesha stepped forward. She looked tired. Her hair was messy, and her eyes were rimmed with red. She looked at me not with compassion, but with annoyance. Dad, just give him the watch. It is just a thing. We need the money. It is not just a thing, Keisha. It is your mother. Do you not remember she gave it to me the day we signed the papers for Jefferson Construction? You were there. You were 5 years old. I do not care about the past, Dad, Keisha snapped. I care about right now. We are broke. We are desperate. If you love me, you will help us. Love you. You sold my house while I was on vacation. You put me in a basement. That is not love, Keisha. That is abuse. Brad growled. He lunged forward. I am done asking. He grabbed my left arm. His grip was strong, painful. He tried to wrench my hand away to get to the clasp. I fought him. I am old, but I worked construction for 40 years. I have grip strength. I locked my arm against my chest. "Let go of me," I shouted. Kesha grabbed my other arm, pulling me back. "Stop fighting, Dad. You are going to hurt yourself. Just give it to us." Brad's fingernails dug into my wrist. He was clawing at the metal clasp. "Open it, you old bat! Open it!" I twisted, pulling away. I saw the rage in Brad's eyes. It was not just desperation anymore. It was hatred. He hated me because I was right. He hated me because he was a failure. He pulled back his fist and shoved me hard. It was a violent two-handed shove directly to my chest. I stumbled backward, my feet tangled in the pile of dirty laundry I had been washing. I fell. The world tilted. I saw the ceiling pipes. I saw the naked bulb. And then I saw the heavy metal shelving unit in the corner. My head connected with the steel upright of the shelf. There was a sickening crack. A flash of white light exploded behind my eyes. Then came the darkness for a split second, followed by a sharp, searing pain. I slumped to the concrete floor. I felt warm liquid trickling down the side of my face. It ran into my eyes, stinging and blurring my vision. It dripped onto my collar. Blood. I lay there dazed. My vision swam. I looked up at them. Brad was standing over me, breathing hard. He looked at the blood on my face. He looked at his own hands. For a second, I thought he might help me. I thought he might realize he had gone too far, but he didn't. He saw an opportunity. While I was stunned on the floor, he knelt down. He grabbed my limp left arm. He undid the clasp. He slid the Rolex off my wrist. "Got it," he whispered. He stood up, holding the watch up to the light. It gleamed silver in the dim basement. Dad, Kesha said her voice was trembling, but she did not move toward me. She stayed by the stairs. "Is he okay?" "He is fine," Brad said, not even looking at me. "He just bumped his head. He is tough. Come on, we have to get to the pawn shop before it closes." He turned and ran up the stairs, clutching my dead wife's gift like a trophy. Kesha looked at me one last time. I was lying in the dirt, bleeding. Her father, the man who paid for her college, the man who walked her down the aisle. She looked at the blood pooling under my head. "I will bring you some ice later," she mumbled. Then she turned and followed her husband. She closed the door, she locked it. I was alone in the dark. The silence of the basement returned, broken only by the drip, drip, drip of my own blood hitting the concrete. I lay there for a long time. The pain in my head was a throbbing drum beat. I felt dizzy, nauseous. I reached up and touched the wound. It was deep, a gash right above my temple. My hand came away wet and red. I should have called for help. I should have banged on the door, but I didn't. I sat up slowly. The room spun, but I forced it to stop. I dragged myself over to where my suitcase was hidden under the pallet. I reached inside the lining and pulled out the BlackBerry. My hands were shaking and covered in blood. I smeared red across the screen as I unlocked it. I did not wipe the blood off my face. I let it run. I wanted it to look exactly as bad as it was. I opened the camera app. I turned the lens toward myself. The image on the screen was horrifying. An old man with gray hair matted with dark blood. A rivulet of red running down his cheek into his white beard. My shirt collar was soaked. My eyes looked hollow, haunted. I snapped the picture. Flash. Then I took a picture of the metal shelf showing the sharp edge with my blood and hair stuck to it. Flash. I took a picture of my empty wrist where the pale skin showed where the watch had been for 40 years. Flash. I opened the secure messaging app. I selected Desmond Clark. I attached the photos. My fingers felt cold and clumsy, but I typed the message. Evidence number 1. Assault causing bodily harm. Robbery. Suspects Brad and Kesha. Location basement. Time 11:45 a.m. I hit send. I watched the progress bar. Sending, sending, send. I put the phone back in its hiding place. I leaned my head back against the cold brick wall. I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. They thought they had won a watch. They thought they had a stake for a game, but they had just handed me the weapon that would end them. Assaulting a senior citizen is a felony. In Illinois, it carries a mandatory prison sentence. Brad had just turned a financial dispute into a violent crime. He had crossed the line from a con artist to a thug. I closed my eyes and listened to the blood dripping onto my shirt. "Enjoy the watch, Brad," I whispered into the darkness. "It is going to cost you 15 years. I was still cleaning my dried blood from the basement floor when my secret phone vibrated. I wiped my hands on a dirty rag and pulled the BlackBerry from its hiding spot under the pallet. It was a text from Desmond Clark. "Look at the news. Channel 5. I did not have a TV in the basement, but I had data on the BlackBerry. I opened the browser and found the live stream. A reporter was standing in front of my house, 4215 Martin Luther King Drive. Behind her, a large yellow excavator was idling on my manicured lawn. Its claw had already ripped down the row iron fence I had installed in 1995. A chunk of the front porch railing was missing. Shadow Creek LLC was not wasting time. They were not moving in. They were tearing it down. They were going to build a multi-unit complex condos quick cash. I watched on the small screen as the machine pivoted. The operator was careless. He swung the arm too wide and smashed the bay window of the living room. Glass shattered. My heart clenched. That window. Beatrice used to sit there and read to Keisha. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run out of the basement and stop them with my bare hands. But I forced myself to breathe. This destruction was part of the plan. It was the bait. I typed a message to Desmond. "Do it now." 5 minutes later, Desmond replied, "Done." The tip has been filed with the Chicago Landmarks Commission. The file number is logged. I sat back against the cold wall. I closed my eyes and imagined the paperwork traveling through the digital veins of the city bureaucracy. My house was not just a house. It was a designated historic landmark. Beatrice had fought for that designation 10 years ago to protect the neighborhood from gentrification. It meant that every brick, every shingle, every window pane was protected by city ordinance. You could not demolish it. You could not even change the color of the paint without a hearing. And Shadow Creek LLC, in their rush to liquidate a bad debt, had not checked the zoning. They had bought a protected asset and treated it like a teardown. I switched back to the live stream. The reporter was still talking, unaware of the legal storm approaching. "We are seeing rapid development here in the South Side," she was saying. "But some neighbors are concerned about the speed of these changes." Suddenly, a white city vehicle pulled up to the curb. It had the seal of the Department of Buildings on the door. 2 men in hard hats and reflective vests jumped out. They did not look happy. One of them was holding a clipboard and a roll of orange tape. They marched up to the site foreman. I could not hear what they were saying, but I saw the body language. The inspector pointed at the broken fence. He pointed at the smashed window. He pointed at the excavator. The foreman threw his hands up. He was arguing. The inspector shook his head and slapped a large orange sticker on the front door. "Stop work order." I zoomed in on the screen. I knew what that sticker meant. It meant everything stopped. Not just for today, for months, maybe years. The inspector pulled out a pad and started writing citations. I could practically count them. Unpermitted demolition damage to historic property safety violations. Each one carried a fine. And for a landmark violation, the fine was $10,000 per day. The excavator engine cut off. The silence was deafening, even through the phone speakers. Shadow Creek LLC had just bought a $350,000 headache, and they couldn't build. They couldn't flip. They were stuck with a property they couldn't touch, racking up fines faster than a taxi meter. I put the phone down. A grim satisfaction settled in my chest, but I knew the ripple effect would be immediate. Upstairs, the phone rang, the landline. Brad still had one for his business calls. I moved to my listening spot under the duct. I heard Brad answer, hello? Then silence. A long, terrified silence. No, wait, Yuri, listen. I did not know. Brad's voice was high panicked. He was pacing again. What do you mean it is frozen? I sold you the house. It is your problem now. He stopped. He must have been listening to threats that would make a normal man wet himself. No, please, Yuri, I swear. I did not know it was a landmark. The old man never told me. He paused. Refund. What do you mean, refund? I do not have the money. I paid off the debt. Another pause. 350. You want the whole purchase price back, Yuri? That is impossible. I do not have it. I heard a crash upstairs. Brad had knocked something over. Please give me time. I can fix this. I can talk to the city. I know people. He knew nobody. He was a gambler with a high school education and a fake Rolex. Okay. 48 hours. Please do not hurt her. Keisha has nothing to do with this. The line went dead. I heard Brad hyperventilating. He was gasping for air. Keisha. I heard my daughter running into the room. What happened? Who was that? It was Yuri. The city shut down the construction site. They say the house is a landmark. They cannot build. They cannot sell. They are stuck with it, so it is their house now. No, it is not. They are saying the sale was fraudulent because I did not disclose the encumbrances. They are saying I sold them a lemon. They want their money back. All of it. $300,000, but we paid them $200. That is gone. They do not care. They want the full purchase price back because the deal is void. They say if I do not have it in 48 hours, they are going to come here. They said they are going to take it out of our skin. Kesha started crying. It was a wailing sound full of terror. We do not have it. We lost the rest in the crypto crash. We have nothing. I know. Brad was crying too now. We are dead. We are literally dead. I sat in the dark basement listening to their terror. It was a cold, hard sound. They were trapped. They were squeezed between the law and the mob, and they had no way out except one. I heard Brad stop crying. I heard him sniffing. The old man? What Keisha asked? The old man? He must have money somewhere. He worked for 40 years. He owned that company. There has to be something we missed. We checked the bank, Brad. It was empty. Maybe he has a stash. Maybe he has bonds. Maybe he has another account. Old people hide money. I heard them moving. They were coming for me. I quickly lay down on my pallet. I pulled the dirty blanket up to my chin. I hid the BlackBerry inside my pillowcase. I closed my eyes. The door flew open. Brad stomped down the stairs. Wake up! I pretended to stir, groaning as I sat up. I touched the bandage on my head where the blood had dried. What is it? What is wrong? Get up! Brad screamed. Where is the money? What money? You took everything. Do not lie to me, Malik. You have a secret stash. I know you do. Where is it? Is it in a safe deposit box? Is it buried in the yard? I looked at him. His eyes were bloodshot. He was shaking. I do not have any money, Brad. I spent it all on Kesha's tuition on the house on your wedding. Liar. He kicked my suitcase. It skidded across the floor. Keisha came down. She looked at me, her face pale. Dad, please. If you have anything at all, you have to tell us. Brad is in trouble. Bad men are coming. They are going to hurt us. You should have thought of that before you sold my house, I said. She flinched. Dad, this is life or death. Do you want us to die? I looked at her. I looked at the daughter I had raised. I want you to learn, I said. Brad grabbed me by the shirt. He hauled me up. His breath smelled of fear. You are holding out on us. I am going to tear this basement apart. I am going to tear you apart. He threw me back onto the mattress. He started ripping open boxes. He dumped out my suitcase. He threw my clothes everywhere. He was looking for cash. He was looking for gold. He was looking for salvation. But he found nothing. Because the only thing of value in that basement was the BlackBerry hidden under my head. And he was too panicked to look there. He tore through the boxes of his own stolen electronics. He threw them against the wall in frustration. There is nothing here. Nothing. He stood in the center of the room panting. Kesha was sobbing on the stairs. What are we going to do, Brad? He looked at me. A dark idea formed in his eyes. He has credit. What? He has a clean credit score. He has a pension. We can get loans. We can get cards. He stole my identity. I said, you already drained the accounts. But we didn't open new ones. Brad said, his voice rising with manic hope. We can apply for everything. High limit cards, personal loans. We can max them out in 24 hours. We can get 50, maybe 60 grand. It is a start. It buys us time. He looked at Keisha. Get his wallet. Get his social security card. Keisha hesitated. Brad, that is fraud. We are already dead if we don't do it. Keisha came over to me. She reached into my pocket. I did not fight her. I let her take my wallet. I let her take the worn social security card I kept behind my license. I am sorry, Dad, she whispered. No, you are not, I said. She took the cards and ran up the stairs. Brad followed her. Start applying, he yelled. Hit every bank. Chase City Acts. Apply for everything. He stopped at the door and looked back at me. You better hope your credit is good, old man, because your life depends on it. He slammed the door. I waited until their footsteps faded. I pulled out the BlackBerry. I sent a message to Desmond. They are trying to open credit lines in my name. Let them. Do not block it yet, Desmond replied instantly. Malik, that ruins your credit. It creates a mess, I typed back. No, it creates a federal trail. Identity theft wire fraud, bank fraud. Let them dig. I lay back down. I listened to them upstairs typing furiously on their laptops, desperate to find a digital lifeline. They were not just digging a hole anymore. They were digging a grave, and they were pulling the dirt in on top of themselves. Wednesday morning brought a silence that felt like a held breath before a scream. The air in the basement was stagnant and heavy with the smell of mold and my own unwashed clothes. I sat on my pallet of curtains staring at the dust motes dancing in the single beam of light coming from the small window at street level. I was hungry. They had not fed me since the sandwich the night before, but hunger was a dull ache compared to the sharp anticipation of what was coming. At 10:00, the front door upstairs slammed open with such force that dust rained down from the basement ceiling rafters. Heavy, frantic footsteps pounded across the laminate floor. It was Brad. He was running. He was hyperventilating. I heard him lock the door. I heard the deadbolt slide. Then I heard the sound of heavy furniture being dragged across the floor, probably to barricade the entrance. He was terrified. The loan sharks had found him. Yuri and his men were not waiting for 48 hours. They were applying pressure now. I moved to my listening spot under the duct. Brad was on the phone, but he was not talking. He was listening. No, please do not come here. I will get it. I swear. Just do not cut me. Please, man. I need my legs. He was sobbing. A grown man crying like a child because he had played a game he did not understand. I stood in the darkness listening to him beg. It gave me no pleasure, but it gave me satisfaction. This was the consequence of greed. This was the bill coming due. Suddenly, the basement door flew open. Brad stood at the top of the stairs. He looked deranged. His hair was wild, his eyes bloodshot, and his shirt was torn at the collar. He held a kitchen knife in one hand. For a second, I thought he was going to kill me. I tensed my muscles ready to fight for my life. But he did not look at me. He looked past me. He looked at the boxes. He looked at the shelves. He looked at my suitcase. He ran down the stairs, stumbling. Money. There has to be money. He started tearing the basement apart. He ripped open the boxes of stolen electronics he had stored. He threw cables and routers across the room. He was looking for cash he might have forgotten. He was looking for anything valuable enough to pawn. He turned to my corner. He kicked my pallet. "Get up, old man, move." I scrambled back against the wall, feigning terror. "Brad, what is happening? Shut up. Where did you hide it?" "Hide what? The money? The gold? The bonds? I know you have something. You had a company. You built skyscrapers. You did not spend it all. You are a liar." He grabbed my suitcase. He dumped it upside down. My clothes spilled out onto the dirty floor. My underwear, my socks, my 2 shirts. He picked them up and shook them, hoping cash would fall out. Nothing. He screamed a sound of pure frustration and threw the empty suitcase against the furnace. He turned to the bookshelf in the corner. It was an old metal shelf where I kept a few personal items they had allowed me to bring down. A few photos of Beatrice, my Bible, and a stack of old construction manuals I had kept for sentimental reasons. Brad swept the photos onto the floor. The glass frame shattered. He grabbed the Bible and shook it. Nothing fell out. He threw it into a puddle of water near the drain. My heart clenched seeing Beatrix's photo in the dirt, but I did not move. I watched him. He grabbed a thick book. It was a manual on structural engineering from 1995. It was heavy-bound in leather. I had hollowed out a small section in the middle pages years ago, not for money, but to keep emergency documents. Brad opened it. He riffled through the pages. Something fell out. It hit the concrete with a metallic clink. It was not paper. It was not a coin. It was a card. Brad froze. He looked down at the object. It was black. It was made of anodized titanium. It caught the dim light of the bulb. He bent down and picked it up. He turned it over in his hands. It was my American Express Centurion card. The black card, the most exclusive credit card in the world. Invitation only. No spending limit. I had kept it active for 20 years, paying the $5,000 annual fee without fail. Even after I retired, it was my ultimate emergency fund, my lifeline. Brad stared at it. He saw my name embossed in silver. Malik Jefferson. He saw the logo American Express. He did not know what a Centurion card was. He was a small-time gambler who dealt in cash and debit cards. To him, it just looked like a weird, heavy credit card. He looked at the expiration date. It was valid for another 3 years. He looked at me, his eyes wide with shock and greed. "You have a credit card?" I pretended to be confused. I squinted at him. "That old thing. I have not used that in years. I think I canceled it. It was for buying lumber." Brad looked at the card again. He felt the weight of it. "It does not say canceled," he whispered. He looked at the back. There was no signature. He looked at me, and a twisted smile spread across his face. "You forgot about this, didn't you? You senile old fool. You have a credit card sitting in a book while we are starving." I tried to grab it. "Give that back, Brad. That is not yours. It is probably expired." He pushed me away easily. Finders, keepers. "Malik, you are destitute. Remember, you do not need credit." He shoved the card into his pocket. The panic in his eyes was replaced by a manic energy. This is it. This is the lifeline. He did not know the limit. He did not know it was unlimited. He probably thought it had a $5,000 limit, like his Capital One card used to have before he maxed it out. He ran up the stairs, leaving the basement in ruins. He slammed the door, and I heard him running down the hallway of the apartment. I waited until I heard the front door of the apartment open and close. He was gone. I reached under the pallet and pulled out the BlackBerry. I opened the American Express app. I'd set it up to send silent alerts for any transaction, but not to decline them, not yet. I sat in the dark and waited. 20 minutes later, the first notification came through. Transaction attempt. Best Buy State Street. Amount won $200. My heart raced. He was testing it. He was buying something small, something easy to resell, an iPhone probably, or a laptop. I stared at the screen. I had the power to decline it right now. I could press one button and the card would be dead. Brad would be humiliated in the store and he would come back here empty-handed and furious. But that was not the plan. If I declined it, he would just be a guy trying to use an old card. No crime, no federal offense. I needed him to succeed. I needed him to steal. I needed him to cross the line from desperation into felony fraud. I watched the screen. Transaction approved. I let out a breath I did not know I was holding. He had done it. He had successfully used a stolen credit card belonging to a senior citizen to make a purchase over $1,000. That was a felony in Illinois, but I knew Brad. One phone was not enough. He needed $200,000. 5 minutes later, another notification. Transaction attempt. Best Buy State Street, amount $4,500. He was buying MacBooks. He was cleaning them out. Transaction approved. 10 minutes later, transaction attempt. Louis Vuitton, Michigan Avenue. Amount $3,200. He was buying luxury goods to resell, or maybe a peace offering for Keisha. Transaction approved. He was running wild. He was drunk on the power of plastic. He thought he had found a magic wand. He thought I was a senile old man who had forgotten to close an account. He had no idea that every swipe of that titanium card was hammering another nail into his coffin. I sat there in the cold basement, surrounded by the wreckage of my life, and I watched the numbers climb. 10,000, 15,000, 20,000. He was not just stealing my money. He was stealing his own freedom. I heard the front door open upstairs an hour later. Brad was back. I heard him laughing. It was a high hysterical sound. Kesha, look. Look at this. I crept to my listening spot. Oh my God, Brad. Where did you get this? Is that a new bag? It is real, baby. And look at this. iPhones, MacBooks. I got it all. How did you pay for this? The old man, he had a card hidden in a book, a black AMX. I tested it. It works. Kesha, it works. The old fool forgot to cancel it. But Brad, that is stealing. If he finds out, he won't find out. He does not even have a phone. He thinks it is expired. And guess what? I checked the receipt. The available credit line does not show a limit. It just says available. What does that mean? It means we are rich, Keisha. It means we can buy tickets. We can fly out of here. We can go to the Maldives. We can disappear before Yuri finds us. You want to run? We have to run. But first we are going to live a little. We deserve this, Keisha. After everything we put up with taking care of him. We deserve a reward. I heard the sound of boxes being ripped open. I heard the beep of new phones being turned on. Let us book a hotel, Brad said. The nicest one in the city, the signature room. Let us have a feast. I want steak. I want lobster. And then we go to the airport. What about my dad? We bring him to the dinner. We make him carry the bags. It will be poetic justice. He pays for the meal and he serves it. And then when we get to the airport, we leave him at the terminal. He can figure it out. Kesha laughed. It was a nervous laugh, but it was a laugh. Okay, let us do it. I stood in the darkness, gripping the BlackBerry. They were going to take me to dinner. They were going to parade me around. Perfect. I typed a message to Desmond. The card is active. He is spending. Do not block it yet. He is planning a dinner at the signature room tonight. High value. Desmond replied instantly. I see the transactions. He has crossed the $25,000 mark. That is grand larceny and federal wire fraud. I typed back. Let him hit 50. I want him to feel like a king before I take his crown. I put the phone away. I straightened my dirty shirt. I brushed the dust off my trousers. I was ready for dinner. I was ready to carry their bags. I was ready to play the servant one last time because tonight the servant was going to become the master. The ceiling above me vibrated with the sound of their joy. It was a sick, perverse kind of happiness, fueled by theft and delusion. I sat on my pile of damp curtains in the basement, listening to the frenzied activity upstairs. Brad and Keisha were not just spending money, they were devouring it. They had returned from their first shopping trip with bags that rustled and boxes that thudded against the floor. But that was just the appetizer. Now they were feasting on the main course. I heard Brad's voice booming with confidence. Book it, baby. First class. I do not want to see anyone's knees. I want the suites with the doors. He was on the phone, or maybe just shouting at a laptop screen. Maldives, the overwater bungalow, the one with the slide into the ocean. 7 nights. No, make it 10. We are not coming back to this dump. I looked down at the BlackBerry in my hand. The screen glowed with a pale, green light in the darkness. A new notification popped up. Transaction alert. Emirates Airlines. $24,000. I did not blink. I did not flinch. I just watched the number burn into the screen. $24,000 for a flight they would never take. Upstairs, Kesha was squealing. Oh my God, Brad, look at this hotel. It is $5,000 a night. They have a private butler. Get it, Brad shouted. Get the meal plan too. Champagne and lobster every night. Notification. The Ritz-Carlton Maldives, $55,000. They were burning through a lifetime of savings in seconds. It was reckless. It was insane. It was exactly what I wanted. I heard the front door open and close again. They were running in and out like children on Christmas morning. Look at this car. I crept to the vent. I heard the crinkle of tissue paper. Hermes, is that a Birkin? You bet it is. 20 grand. Resale value is insane, but you are keeping it. You deserve to look like a queen when we land. Notification, Hermes, Chicago, $21,500. My heart was beating a slow, steady rhythm. Thump, thump, thump. With every beat, they hammered another nail into their coffin. They were not just stealing. They were crossing state lines with the intent. They were booking international travel with fraudulent funds. They were turning a family dispute into an Interpol notice. I sat back against the cold brick wall. The basement was freezing, but I felt a strange heat in my veins. It was the heat of the hunter waiting in the blind. The notifications kept coming. Ting, ting, ting. It was a symphony of destruction. Transaction. Toomey luggage, $3,000. Transaction. Saks Fifth Avenue, $8,000. Transaction. Uber Black, $100. They were moving fast. They were trying to convert the credit into tangible assets before anyone noticed. They thought they had found a glitch in the matrix, a magic card with no bottom. My BlackBerry vibrated with a call. It was Desmond, I answered, keeping my voice to a whisper. Desmond. Malik, are you seeing this? I am seeing it. We have to kill the card. Malik, this is getting out of hand. They just dropped 20 grand at Hermes. The fraud algorithm at AMX is going to trip any second. I am holding it open manually with an override code from my contact in security, but he is getting nervous. Let him be nervous, I said. Malik, listen to me. You are liable for this until we report it. No, I am not. The trust is liable, and the trust is the victim of a crime. This is madness, Desmond hissed. They are at $85,000. That is a fortune. Why are we waiting? We have them on grand larceny. We have them on identity theft. It is enough. It is not enough, I said. My voice was hard as the concrete floor. If we stop now, they get 5 years maybe. With good behavior, they are out in 3. Brad will claim he didn't know the limit. He will claim he thought I gave him permission. He will cry to a jury about his gambling debts and his addiction. So, what is the magic number? Desmond asked. $100,000, I said. Why? Because at $100,000, it triggers the federal sentencing enhancement for aggravated financial crimes against a vulnerable senior citizen. It moves it from a state case to a federal case. It guarantees mandatory minimums. It means no parole. It means Brad dies in prison. There was a long silence on the line. You are a cold son of a gun, Malik. They put me in a basement, Desmond. They sold my wife's house. They threw away her ashes. I am not cold, I am just numb. Desmond sighed. Okay, $100,000. But the second it hits six figures, I am calling the FBI. No, I said. Wait for what? Wait for the party. What party? Just watch the transactions, Desmond. You will see. I hung up. Upstairs, the music was blaring. They were drinking my wine. They were packing their new suitcases. They were celebrating their victory over the stupid old man in the basement. I checked the total. $88,000. Come on, Brad, I whispered. Do not get cheap now. Buy the shoes, buy the watch. Go big. As if he heard me, the phone buzzed. Transaction. Rolex boutique, $12,000, $100,000. We had crossed the line. There was no going back. Brad had just bought a ticket to federal prison, and he thought it was a Rolex. The spending slowed down around 6 in the evening. I sat in the dark, hungry and tired, but alert. I heard them moving around upstairs getting dressed. I smelled expensive perfume wafting down through the floorboards. The basement door opened. Brad stood there. He was wearing a new tuxedo. It fit him badly tight across the shoulders. On his wrist was the new Rolex, shining in the dim light. He looked like a penguin who had won the lottery. Get up, Malik. I stood up, brushing the dust off my trousers. What is it, Brad? We are going out. Out. Yeah, we are having a farewell dinner, a celebration. We leave for the Maldives tomorrow morning, so tonight we feast. I do not have any nice clothes, Brad. You threw them all on the floor. Brad laughed. You're not eating with us, old man. You're coming to carry the bags. We bought a lot of stuff today. We need a pack mule. And besides, I want you to see what success looks like. He threw a garment bag at me. Put this on. It is an old suit I found in the closet. It is too small for me, but it should fit a shriveled up guy like you. I want you to look presentable enough to walk through the lobby, but pathetic enough that everyone knows you work for me. I took the suit. It was one of my old work suits from 20 years ago, moth-eaten stained. I put it on. It hung off my frame. I looked ridiculous. I looked broken. Perfect. Brad sneered. Brad, you look like a butler who fell down the stairs. We went upstairs. Kesha was there. She was wearing a sequined gown and the new diamond she had bought with my credit. She looked beautiful and terrible. She looked like her mother, but without the soul. Dad, she said, you look nice. I looked at her. You're wearing diamonds, Kesha. While I sleep on concrete. She looked away, touching the necklace nervously. It is just for tonight, Dad. We're starting a new life. You will be fine here. The rent is paid up for the month. She was lying. They were abandoning me. They were going to leave me in an empty apartment with no food and no money while they flew to paradise. Let us go, Brad said, checking his new watch. The reservation is at 8. Where are we going? I asked. The signature room, Brad said, puffing out his chest. Top of the Hancock 95th floor. Best view in the city. Only the best for the winners. The signature room. I knew it well. I had poured the foundation for the John Hancock Center back in 1968 when I was just an apprentice. I knew every beam of steel in that building. It was fitting. We were going to the top of the world to watch them fall. We took an Uber Black to the building. The driver opened the door for Brad and Keisha. I had to open my own. I carried the shopping bags, 4 of them heavy with designer boxes. We rode the elevator up, my ears popped. Brad was giddy taking selfies with Keisha. Look at this view, babe. This is our city now. We own this town. We walked into the restaurant. The Mater D looked at me with concern. My suit was wrinkled. My face was unshaven. And I was carrying shopping bags like a servant. Is this gentleman with you, sir? He asked Brad. Yeah, he is with us. Brad said loudly. He is the help. Just put him in a chair in the corner. He is not eating. The mater frowned, but Brad flashed the heavy black card. Whatever you want, sir. They sat at a window table, the city lights spread out below them like a carpet of diamonds. I was seated on a small folding chair near the service station, 10 FT away. I placed the shopping bags at my feet. I watched them order. Caviar service, $200. Seafood tower, $300. Bottle of Dominion, $500. Wagyu steaks, $400. Brad was shouting at the waiter, ordering everything on the menu. He was drunk on power. He was drunk on theft. He waved at me holding up a glass of champagne. Cheers, Malik. Thanks for the memories. I sat stoically, my hands folded in my lap. I felt the BlackBerry vibrating in my pocket. It was Desmond. Total spend is $120,000. Malik, the FBI is coordinating with Chicago PD. They are 5 minutes out. I did not reply. I just watched. Brad was laughing loud and obnoxious. He was attracting stares from the other diners. He did not care. He thought he was untouchable. He leaned over and kissed Keisha. To us, baby, to the good life. To us? Kesha smiled, clinking her glass against his. They were celebrating their crime. They were toasting their betrayal. I looked at the waiter approaching with the bill folder. It was time. Brad opened the folder. He did not even look at the total. He just pulled out the black titanium card and dropped it onto the tray with a heavy clatter. Put a 20% tip on there, my good man, and bring me another bottle for the road. The waiter bowed and walked away with the card. I watched Brad. He was leaning back, hands behind his head, looking out at the skyline. He looked like a king. Then I saw the waiter stop at the terminal. I saw him swipe the card. I saw him frown. I saw him swipe it again. He picked up the phone. He spoke for a moment. His face went pale. He walked back to the table. He was not bowing anymore. Sir, he said, his voice cutting through the chatter of the restaurant. Brad looked up, annoyed. What is it? Bring the bottle, sir. The card was declined. Brad laughed. A loud barking sound. Declined. Do you know what that is? That is a Centurion card. It has no limit. Run it again. I ran it 3 times, sir. The bank says the card has been reported stolen. The restaurant went silent. People turned to look. Stolen, Brad shouted, standing up. That is a lie. That is my card. Run it again or I will buy this whole place and fire you. Sir, I need you to lower your voice. Do you have another form of payment? I stood up. I picked up the shopping bags. I walked over to the table. Brad turned to me, his face red with rage and panic. Malik, tell him. Tell him it is your card. Tell him you gave it to me. I looked at him. I looked at Keisha. I looked at the waiter. I do not know this man, I said clearly, and that is my card he stole from my house. Brad's eyes bulged. He lunged for me. You lying old bat. But before he could touch me, the elevator doors chimed. They did not open for guests. They opened for the law, and the party was over. Brad insisted that we make an entrance. He wanted witnesses to his ascension. He had called 3 of his gambling buddies, men who usually spent their nights in smoky basement in Cicero, and told them to meet us at the 95th floor. He wanted an audience for his coronation. We stood in the lobby of the Hancock Center waiting for the elevator. Kesha looked like a movie star in her sequined gown and the diamond necklace that caught the lobby lights. Brad was pining in his ill-fitting tuxedo, constantly adjusting the cuff to show off the Rolex. And then there was me. I stood 5T behind them, clutching 4 massive shopping bags filled with the spoils of their theft. The suit Brad had forced me to wear was a charcoal gray wool number I had bought at a thrift store 20 years ago for dirty jobs. It was stained with oil freight at the cuffs and smelled of mothballs and despair. It hung loosely on my frame, making me look shrunken and frail. "Fix your tie, Malik," Brad snapped without turning around. "You look like a hobo. Try to have some class for once in your life." I adjusted the tie. It was crooked. I kept my head down. I played the part. When the elevator doors opened, Brad strutted out like he owned the building. We walked into the restaurant and the mattress smile faltered when he saw me. He looked from the glittering couple to the old man shuffling behind them like a pack mule. "Is he with you, sir?" the mater asked, his eyes scanning my scuffed shoes. Brad laughed loudly. "Unfortunately, yes. He is the help. Just put a chair in the corner for him. He is not eating. He is just here to hold the bags. We cannot trust him to leave them in the coat check. He might forget where he is." The maitre d' looked uncomfortable, but Brad slipped him a $100 bill from the roll of cash he had taken from the ATM earlier. "Whatever you say, sir. Follow me." They were seated at a prime window table, overlooking the sprawling grid of Chicago lights. The city burned gold and amber below us. Amber. I knew that grid. I knew the men who laid the cables and poured the asphalt. But tonight I was just a shadow in the corner. I was seated on a small folding chair near the service station, the shopping bags piled around my feet like a barricade. Brad's friends arrived a few minutes later. They were loud men in cheap suits, their eyes darting around the expensive room as if they expected to be kicked out. There was Tony, a bookie with a nervous tic, and Mike, a guy who sold salvage parts. They greeted Brad with high fives and back slaps. "Look at you," Tony shouted. "You hit the big one, huh?" Brad leaned back, spreading his arms wide. "I told you, boys. I told you I had a System Titan coin. It went to the moon just like I said, and then I liquidated some real estate assets. Just moving money around. You know how it is?" He was lying to liars. Titan coin had crashed to zero. He had no assets. He was spending stolen credit on a dead man's walk. "Sit down, boys," Brad commanded. "Order whatever you want. The sky is the limit tonight." They sat. They ordered. They did not look at prices. They ordered seafood towers that looked like ice sculptures. They ordered steaks the size of hubcaps. They ordered bottle after bottle of Dom Perignon. The table filled with food. The smell of truffle oil and seared beef wafted over to my corner. My stomach grumbled. I had not eaten since the sandwich the night before. I watched them tear into the lobster butter running down their chins. "Who is the old guy?" Mike asked, pointing a fork at me. Brad swirled his champagne glass. He looked at me with a mix of pity and disgust. "That is my father-in-law." Malik's sad story, really. He used to be a construction worker or something. Now he just wanders around. He lost his house. He lost his savings. He is completely dependent on us. Kesha took a sip of her wine. She did not correct him. She stared out the window, avoiding my gaze. We took him in. Brad continued, his voice rising so the neighboring tables could hear. "We put a roof over his head. We feed him. It is a burden, a heavy burden. But what are you going to do? Family is family. You are a saint." Brad Tony said, tearing a piece of bread. "I would have put him in a home." "We thought about it," Brad said solemnly. "But the state homes are terrible, and we could not afford a private one. So we sacrificed. We gave up our privacy. We gave up our spare room." He did not mention the basement. He did not mention the $500 rent. He did not mention the forgery. I sat there, my hands folded on my lap. I listened to him rewrite history. I listened to him paint himself as the savior and me as the parasite. Hey, Malik. Brad shouted across the gap. You want a bread roll? He picked up a roll from the basket and tossed it through the air. It bounced off my chest and landed on the floor. Oops. Butterfingers. Brad laughed. His friends roared with laughter. Even Keisha cracked a smile. Pick it up, Dad, she said softly. It is sourdough. You like sourdough. I bent down. I picked up the roll. I wiped the dust off it. I did not eat it. I placed it gently on top of the Louis Vuitton bag at my feet. The waiter came by to refill the champagne. He looked at me, then at the roll on the bag. He looked at Brad. I saw a flicker of judgment in his eyes. He knew. Service people always know who the real garbage is. Brad was drunk now. He was loud. He was telling stories about deals he never made and money he never earned. Yeah. So I told the developer, if you want this land, you have to go through me. I am the gatekeeper. He was mimicking the way I used to talk on the job site. He was stealing my life, my words, my mannerisms, and twisting them into a caricature. I checked my pocket. The BlackBerry was vibrating. Desmond. The FBI is in position in the lobby. The message read, we are waiting for the final charge. I looked at Brad. He was red-faced, sweating, laughing at a joke Tony made about poor people. He had no idea. He was sitting on top of the world, and the foundation was made of dynamite. The waiter cleared the plates. The table was a mess of empty shells and bones. Dessert, gentlemen, the waiter asked. Everything, Brad slurred. Bring the chocolate cake, the cheesecake, the gold leaf sundae. Bring it all and bring the bill. We have a plane to catch. The dessert course was a blur of sugar and gluttony. They ate until they were groaning. Finally, the waiter returned. He carried a black leather folder. He placed it gently in front of Brad. The table went quiet. Tony and Mike leaned in, curious to see the damage. Brad opened the folder. He whistled. $1,400, he announced. Tony's eyes bugged out. 15 grand. Brad, are you crazy? Brad chuckled. He reached into his tuxedo pocket. He pulled out the black titanium card. He held it up to the light so everyone could see the centurion glint. Pocket change, boys. Pocket change. He looked at me. His eyes were glassy. Hey, Malik, look at this. This is what success looks like. You worked 40 years and you never ate a meal like this. I make one phone call and I eat like a king. That is the difference between a worker and a boss. He was right. I had never eaten a $15,000 meal. I built hospitals, I built schools, I built homes. I ate sandwiches in my truck so I could put money in the trust. Brad tossed the card onto the bill folder. It landed with a heavy, authoritative thud. Swipe it, my good man, he said to the waiter, waving his hand dismissively. No PIN needed. Add 20% for yourself. The waiter took the folder. He took the card. He bowed slightly and walked away toward the terminal station near the entrance. Brad leaned back, lacing his fingers behind his head. He winked at Keisha. Maldives, here we come, baby. I watched the waiter. I saw him insert the card. I saw him wait. I saw him frown. He pulled the card out. He wiped the chip on his apron. He inserted it again. He typed something into the terminal. He picked up the restaurant phone. Brad was busy laughing with Mike. He did not notice, but I noticed. The waiter hung up the phone. He whispered something to the manager standing next to him. The manager looked at our table. He looked at Brad. He nodded. The waiter walked back. He was not smiling. The bounce was gone from his step. I stood up. My knees cracked. I smoothed the front of my dirty, moth-eaten suit. I picked up the heavy Hermes bag in one hand and the Saks bag in the other. I walked out of my corner. Brad saw me moving. Sit down, old man, he barked. We are not leaving yet. I ignored him. I walked right up to the table. I stood next to the waiter who had just arrived. "Sir," the waiter said to Brad, his voice loud and clear in the sudden silence of the dining room. "There is a problem." Brad frowned. "Problem? What problem?" "The card was declined, sir." Brad laughed. It was a nervous, angry sound. "Declined." "You are an idiot. That is an MX Black. It does not decline." "Run it again." "I ran it 3 times, sir. The bank has flagged it. They say it is stolen." The word hung in the air. Stolen. Tony and Mike pulled back from the table. They looked at Brad. They looked at the card. Stolen. Brad shouted, standing up so fast his chair fell over. "That is my card. My name is on the account." I stepped forward. I placed the shopping bags on the table, crushing the leftover lobster shells. "No," I said. My voice was not the voice of a homeless old man. It was the voice of the man who ran job sites for 40 years. It was deep. It was gravel. It was command. "That is not your card, Brad." Brad spun on me. His face was purple. "Shut up, Malik. Sit down." I looked him in the eye. I saw the fear behind the rage. "I am done sitting down, and I am done paying for your dinner." I turned to the waiter. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out my California driver's license, the one I kept hidden. "My name is Malik Jefferson," I said. "That card belongs to me, and I reported it stolen 5 minutes ago." Brad lunged. "You lying old bat, give me that card." He grabbed for the folder. He grabbed for me, but he never made contact because the elevator doors chimed behind us. And when they opened, it wasn't other diners who stepped out. It was 4 men in FBI windbreakers. And the party was officially over. The waiter walked back toward the table, and his face was the color of old parchment paper. He was not walking with the bounce of a man expecting a massive tip anymore. He was walking with the stiff, terrified gait of a man who was about to deliver bad news to a table full of drunks. The restaurant was buzzing with the low hum of expensive conversations and clinking silverware. But around Brad's table, the air seemed to thicken. Brad was still leaning back in his chair, one arm draped over the back, laughing at something Mike had said about a horse race. He did not see the waiter approaching, but I did. I saw the way the manager was watching from the podium, his hand hovering near the security phone. I saw the way the busboys had stopped clearing the neighboring tables. The waiter stopped right next to Brad. He cleared his throat. It was a small, nervous sound, but it cut through Brad's laughter like a knife. Brad looked up annoyed that his story had been interrupted. He held out his hand, expecting the black folder, with the receipt expecting to sign his name with a flourish and walk out like a king. But the waiter did not hand him the folder. He held it tight against his chest like a shield. "Sir," the waiter said, and his voice cracked. "We have a problem." Brad frowned. His eyes narrowed. He looked at the empty table where the feast had been. He looked at the empty bottles of champagne. "Probably what problem?" "Did you run out of cognac?" "No, sir." The card. It was declined. The words hung in the air, heavy and absolute. Declined. It was a word that did not belong in a place like the signature room. It was a word for corner stores and dive bars. Brad stared at the waiter, his mouth opened slightly. He looked like he had been slapped. Declined. "You're crazy. That is an American Express Centurion. It has no limit. Do you know who I am?" "I'm sorry, sir," the waiter stammered, taking a half step back. The machine rejected it. It gave a code. Code. What code? "Run it again." "I ran it 3 times, sir. The bank has flagged the account. They say the card has been reported stolen." The silence that followed was total. The clinking of forks at the next table stopped. Tony and Mike, who had been laughing seconds ago, froze. They looked at Brad. They looked at the waiter. And then they looked at each other with the sudden sharp clarity of rats sensing a sinking ship stolen. Brad stood up. His chair scraped violently against the floor, knocking over a crystal water glass. It shattered, but no one moved. Stolen. That is my card. My name is on the account. You are incompetent. Give me the card back. I'm going to call them right now and have your job." The waiter looked terrified. He looked toward the manager for help. "I cannot return the card, sir. Bank protocol requires we confiscate it." Brad's face turned a deep, violent shade of purple. A vein in his neck bulged against his tight collar. He looked ready to hit the waiter. He looked ready to tear the place down. "Give me my card," he roared. That was my cue. I'd been standing in the shadows by the service station, a silent observer, a piece of furniture. But now I moved. I dropped the heavy shopping bags. They hit the floor with a thud. I stepped out of the corner. I was not shuffling anymore. I was not hunching my shoulders. I walked with the stride of a man who had walked steel beams 60 stories in the air. I walked with the weight of 40 years of authority. I stepped between Brad and the waiter. I reached out my hand. My palm was calloused, rough, and steady. "Give it to me, son," I said to the waiter. The waiter looked at me. He saw the old suit. He saw the unshaven face even. But he also saw my eyes. And in my eyes, he saw something that Brad did not have. He saw command. Without a word, the waiter handed me the black titanium card. I held it up. It felt heavy, cold, and righteous in my hand. I looked at the name embossed in silver, Malik Jefferson. Brad stared at me. His eyes were bulging. His mouth worked, but no sound came out at first. He looked at the card in my hand, then at my face, then back at the card. The reality was fracturing his delusion. The narrative he had built that I was a helpless, senile dependent was crumbling brick by brick. "Give that to me, Brad!" shouted, lunging forward. "That is mine! You gave that to me!" I took a step back, holding the card out of his reach. "No, Brad," I said. My voice was deep, growly, and loud enough to reach the back of the room. "I did not give this to you. You stole it. You stole it from my suitcase while I was sleeping in your basement. You stole it just like you stole my dignity. Liar!" Brad screamed. He looked around at the diners who were now staring openly. He is senile. He does not know what he is saying. He is my father-in-law. I take care of him. He forgets things. He turned to his friends, pleading, "Tell them, guys. Tell them I take care of him." Tony and Mike did not say a word. They were pushing their chairs back, standing up. They were distancing themselves. They knew the smell of trouble. And this smelled like a felony. "I did not forget anything, Brad," I said, stepping closer to him. "I remember everything. I remember you throwing my wife's Bible on the floor. I remember you making me scrub your underwear. And I remember you taking this card and thinking you had found a golden ticket." I held up the card. "It was not declined because of a glitch, Brad. It was declined because I called American Express 5 minutes ago. I verified my identity. I told them my card was in the possession of a thief, and I told them to lock it down." Brad looked like he was going to vomit. The color drained from his face, leaving him gray and sweaty. He looked at the bill folder on the table. $15,000. "You killed the card." "I killed it." "But the bill," Brad whispered. "Who is going to pay the bill?" I looked at the table. I looked at the lobster shells and the empty bottles of champagne. "You are," I said. "You ate it. You drank it. You pay for it." "I do not have any money," he hissed. "You know I do not have any money." "Then I guess you are washing dishes," I said coldly. "Or maybe you can pay them with your new Rolex." "Oh, wait. You bought that with my card, too. That belongs to the bank now." Brad looked at Kesha. She was sitting frozen in her chair, her hand covering her mouth, her eyes wide with terror. She had not moved since the waiter delivered the news. She knew. She realized in that moment that the ride was over. "Do something," Brad hissed at me. "Fix this. You have money. You have the card. Just unlock it, pay the bill, and we can go. We will pay you back. I swear. Pay me back. With what? With the money you lost on crypto. With the money you owe the loan sharks. Brad flinched at the mention of the loan sharks. You are enjoying this, he spat. You sick old man. You set me up. I did not set you up, Brad. I just gave you enough rope and you used it to hang yourself perfectly. Brad's eyes shifted. He looked at the exit. He looked at the waiter blocking the path. He looked at me. The desperation took over. The animal instinct to survive kicked in. Give me the card, he shouted, and he lunged. He came at me with his hands reaching for my throat. He wanted to hurt me. He wanted to silence me. He wanted to take back the power. I did not move. I did not flinch. I reached into my pocket with my other hand and pulled out the BlackBerry. I held it up like a shield. I pressed the speakerphone button. The volume was set to maximum. Brad, stop, I commanded. He froze inches from my face, his hands raised. He saw the phone. He saw the red light of an active call. Who are you talking to? He breathed. I am not talking, I said. I am listening. And so are you. I held the phone out between us. Go ahead, Desmond. He is all yours. The voice that came out of the speaker was smooth, calm, and terrifyingly professional. It echoed in the silent restaurant. It was the voice of Desmond Clark, the most expensive lawyer in Chicago. Hello, Brad. Brad stared at the phone. Brad stared at the... Who is this? This is Desmond Clark, attorney at law, representing the Beatrice Jefferson Irrevocable Trust, and Mr. Malik Jefferson. Brad looked confused. Trust what? Trust. The trust that owns the house at 421 Fine Martin Luther King Drive. Desmond said, his voice cutting through the air like a scalpel. You see, Brad, you made a very critical error in your calculations. You assumed that because Malik lived in the house, he owned the house. But he does not. The house belongs to a legal entity created 10 years ago. Malik is just the trustee. Brad blinked. He looked at Keisha. What does that mean? It means Desmond continued that the quit-claim deed Keisha signed is a worthless piece of paper. It means you sold a property you did not own. It means you committed title fraud, real estate fraud, and theft by deception against the buyers. Shadow Creek LLC. Brad staggered back. He hit the edge of the table. A fork clattered to the floor. But the money. We got the money. Yes, you did, Desmond said. And that is where it gets worse. You took $350,000 for a sale that is legally void. That is grand larceny. But that is just the beginning. I watched Brad's face crumble. He was trying to process the information, but it was too much. The walls were closing in. We have been tracking your spending, Brad. Desmond went on relentlessly. We have a log of every transaction you made with the Centurion card. The flights to the Maldives, the jewelry, the electronics, the dinner you just ate. So what Brad stammered, it is a family dispute. It is civil. No, Brad, it is not civil. The total amount you have charged to that card in the last 48 hours is $123,000. So Desmond said, his voice dropping to a deadly whisper. Once the theft crosses $100,000 and involves a victim over the age of 65, it triggers federal sentencing guidelines. It is no longer a local matter, Brad. It is wire fraud. It is identity theft. And because you use the internet to book flights and move money, it is interstate commerce crimes. Brad looked at me. His eyes were wide, filled with horror. You did this. You knew. I just stood there holding the phone. And one more thing, Brad, Desmond added. Since the house belongs to a trust and you attempted to defraud a trust, you have engaged in complex financial crimes. I have already forwarded the entire file, including the audio recordings Malik made of you admitting to the theft and the forgery, to the United States Attorney's Office. Recordings, Brad whispered. Every word Desmond said, every threat, every admission. The FBI agents currently securing the lobby have copies of everything. They are very interested in meeting the man who spent $100,000 of a senior citizen's money in 2 days. Brad looked at the elevator doors. He looked at the window. He was 95 stories up. There was no way out. "This is a joke," he said, his voice trembling. "This is a prank. Malik, tell him to stop." I looked at him. I looked at the man who had called me a homeless person, the man who had made me sleep on concrete. "It is not a joke, Brad," I said. "It is the end." Brad let out a scream of pure frustration. He grabbed a wine bottle from the table. He raised it over his head. "I will kill you," he screamed. "I will kill you, old man." Tony and Mike backed away, hands up. "Whoa, Brad." "Take it easy, man," Tony said. "It is over." Brad ignored him. He swung the bottle toward me, but he never finished the swing. The elevator doors chimed. Ding! Everyone turned. The doors slid open. 4 men in blue windbreakers with yellow letters on the back stepped out. They had guns on their hips and badges on their chests. "FBI, nobody move." Brad froze the bottle, still raised in the air. He looked at the agents. He looked at me. He looked at the $15,000 bill on the table. "Drop the bottle, son." One of the agents commanded, his hand resting on his weapon. Brad dropped the bottle. It hit the carpet with a dull thud and rolled away, spilling the last dregs of expensive wine. He fell to his knees. He put his hands on his head. He started to cry. It was not a cry of remorse. It was the cry of a man who realized the game was rigged, and he had been playing against the house the whole time. Keisha stood up slowly. She looked at me. Her face was a mask of shock. "Dad," she whispered, "what have you done?" I looked at her. "My daughter, my greatest failure. I did what I had to do," I said. "I cleaned the house." The elevator doors slid open with a soft hydraulic hiss that sounded like a snake striking in the silence of the dining room. But it was not more police officers who stepped out into the plush carpeting of the 95th floor. It was not the hotel security or the manager. Standing there framed by the steel doors were 2 men who looked like they had been carved out of granite and dressed in suits that cost too much but fit too poorly. They were massive, towering over the maître who tried to step in their path. One had a neck as thick as a utility pole and a scar that ran through his eyebrow. The other was bald with hands the size of shovels. They were the kind of men you do not see in places like the Signature Room unless they are there to break things. They stepped into the restaurant, and the air in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees, and they did not look at the view of the city lights. They did not look at the stunned diners holding their forks in midair. They scanned the room with the predatory efficiency of wolves looking for a wounded deer. Their eyes swept over me, over the waiter, over Keisha, and finally landed on Brad, who was still on his knees, sobbing into his hands. It was Shadow Creek. These were Yuri's men. They had tracked him. Brad had been posting photos on social media all night. He had tagged the location. He had bragged about his view. He had practically sent up a flare gun signaling his location to the men he had defrauded. In his arrogance, he had forgotten that smartphones are tracking devices and loan sharks have very good software. The bald man pointed a finger at Brad. It was not a gesture of accusation. It was a designation of a target. They moved forward. They walked right past the FBI agents who were still securing the perimeter of the room. They walked past the terrified manager. They moved with a momentum that suggested stopping them would be like trying to stop a freight train with a paper shield. Brad looked up through his tears. He saw them. The color that had already drained from his face somehow drained further, leaving him looking like a corpse that had been left in the water too long. He scrambled backward on his knees, knocking over a chair. "No," he whimpered. "Not here. Please, not here." The men did not speak. They did not care about the venue. They did not care about the witnesses. They did not care about the federal agents standing 10 ft away. In their world, a debt was a debt, and disrespect was a capital offense. They closed the distance in 3 long strides. The scarred man reached down. He grabbed Brad by the lapels of his ill-fitting tuxedo. He hauled him up off the floor as if Brad weighed nothing more than a bag of laundry. Brad's feet dangled inches off the ground, his patent leather shoes scraping against the table leg. The man slammed Brad back against the reinforced glass of the window. The glass shuddered. Below them, Chicago sprawled out 1,000 CFT down. "You thought you could run," the man growled. His voice was a low rumble like gravel in a mixer. "You thought you could hide in the sky." "I was not running." Brad choked out his hands, clawing uselessly at the man's wrists. "I was just celebrating. I was going to pay you." "Pay us," the bald man said, stepping in close. "You sold us air. You sold us a ghost house." He slapped Brad. It was not a theatrical slap. It was a heavy, open-handed blow that sounded like a gunshot. Brad's head snapped back. Blood flew from his lips, splattering onto the white tablecloth. "The city shut us down today," the scarred man hissed. "They put a red tag on the gate. They said the deed is fake. They said the house belongs to a trust. You sold us a property you do not own. You committed fraud against Shadow Creek." "We did not know," Brad screamed. "We thought it was his." "You thought the bald man mocked." "You took $350,000 of our money. You took it cash. And now the house is locked up. The city is investigating us. And you are here eating lobster." He grabbed a bottle of Dom Perrin from the table. It was still half full. He smashed the neck of the bottle against the edge of the table. Glass shards flew. Champagne foamed onto the carpet. He held the jagged glass inches from Brad's face. "Where is the money, Brad?" "Where is our $350,000? I do not have it," Brad wailed. "I spent it. I invested it." "It is gone." "Gone," the scarred man roared. He shook Brad so hard his head banged against the window again. "You spent $300 in 3 days. Crypto." Brad sobbed. "I put it in crypto. It crashed. It is gone, I swear." The bald man looked at the scarred man. He looked at the jagged bottle in his hand. He looked at Brad's terrified face. "Then we are going to take it out of you," he said simply. "We are going to take it out of your skin. We are going to take it out of your bones. And when we are done with you, we are going to find your wife, and we are going to take the rest out of her." Kesha screamed. It was a high, piercing sound that shattered the tension in the room. She was huddled in her chair, clutching her diamond necklace as if it could protect her. "No!" she shrieked. "Leave me alone. I did not do anything. It was him. It was all him." The scarred man looked at her. His eyes were dead. "You signed the papers too, lady. You are the one with the power of attorney. You are the one who forged the signature. You are just as guilty." He dropped Brad. Brad crumpled to the floor, gasping for air. The scarred man reached into his jacket. He pulled out a pair of heavy leather gloves. He put them on slowly, deliberately. "You have 5 seconds to produce the money," he said, "or we start throwing people out of this window." I stood there watching. The FBI agents had their hands on their weapons, but they had not moved yet. They were letting the crime happen. They were letting the conspiracy unravel. They were letting Brad and Kesha feel the full weight of the consequences they had courted. Brad looked up at me. His face was a mask of blood and tears. He crawled toward me. He grabbed the hem of my dirty pants. "Malik?" he begged. "Help me. Tell them you have money." I looked down at him. I felt nothing. No pity, no anger, just a cold hollowness. "I do not have any money, Brad," I said. "I am just a homeless old man, remember?" Brad looked at Kesha. "Kesha, do something. Ask him. He has the card. He has the millions." Kesha looked at the men. She looked at the jagged bottle. She looked at her husband bleeding on the floor. Then she looked at me, her father. She threw herself off the chair. She fell to her knees at my feet. Her expensive dress pulled around her on the floor, soaking up the spilled champagne and Brad's blood. She grabbed my hands. Her fingers were cold and trembling. "Dad," she cried. Dad, please. You have to pay them. I looked at her. I looked at the tears streaming down her face, ruining her makeup. Pay them, I asked. Yes, pay them. You are rich. Brad said, you have millions. You have that black card. You have the trust fund. Just give them the money, Dad. Write them a check, transfer it. Do whatever you have to do. She squeezed my hands so hard her nails dug into my skin. They are going to kill him, Dad. They are going to kill me. You cannot let that happen. You are my father. You are supposed to protect me. Protect you, I said softly. Yes. Protect us. You have the money. It means nothing to you. You are old. You do not need it. We are young. We have a future. Please, Dad, just pay the debt. Be the hero. Be the builder. One last time. I looked into her eyes. I searched for something, anything that resembled love. I searched for regret. I searched for an apology, but I saw nothing. I saw only greed. I saw entitlement. Even now, with a knife to her throat, she felt entitled to my labor. She felt entitled to the sweat off my brow. She did not care that they had stolen from me. She did not care that they had abused me. She only cared that I had the means to save her from the consequences of her own actions. She did not see me as a father. She saw me as an ATM. She saw me as a resource to be minded until it was empty. You are a general contractor, Dad. She pleaded, desperate now. You fix things. Fix this. I pulled my hands away from hers. I took a step back, breaking her hold. I smoothed the front of my wrinkled, stolen suit. I adjusted my glasses. I looked at the enforcers who were watching the scene with impatient eyes. I looked at the FBI agents who were finally moving in, closing the net. I looked down at my daughter. I am wealthy, Keisha, I said. My voice was steady, calm, and final. I have millions in the bank. I own buildings you walk past every day. I built half this city. I have enough money to pay these men 10 times over and not even feel it. I could write a check right now, and this nightmare would end for you. Hope flared in her eyes. She smiled through her tears. Yes, Dad. Yes, thank you. I knew you would, but I'm not going to pay them, I said. The smile froze on her face. What? I said, no, but Dad, why? You have it. You just said you have it. I do have it, but I'm not stupid. I gestured to the room, to the wreckage of the dinner, to the stolen luxury bags, to the man cowering on the floor. You stole my house, Kesha. You put me in a basement. You made me scrub your floors. You treated me like a dog in the street. You took my wife's ashes and you put them in a cardboard box in the garage. I leaned down close to her face so she could hear the whisper of my rage. You broke the one rule of construction, Keisha. You never build on a rotten foundation, and you two are rotten to the core. Dad, please. She wailed, reaching for me again. Do not touch me, I snapped. I stood up straight. I looked at the scarred man holding the broken bottle. She is all yours, I said. Brad screamed. You monster! You selfish old monster! I turned my back on them. I walked toward the elevator. I am not a monster, Brad, I said over my shoulder. I am a retired electrician living on a pension, and I cannot afford to pay your debts. The scarred man stepped forward, raising the bottle. That is enough talk, he growled. Time to pay up. But before he could bring the glass down, a voice boomed from the other side of the room. Federal agents dropped the weapon. The room exploded into motion. The 4 men in windbreakers drew their weapons. The doors to the kitchen burst open and more agents poured out. The lobby entrance swarmed with uniformed police officers. Desmond had timed it perfectly. He had let the scene play out. He had let them confess. He had let them threaten violence. And now he was bringing the hammer down. I stood by the elevator doors watching the chaos. I watched the enforcers drop their weapons and raise their hands. I watched Brad try to crawl under the table only to be dragged out by an agent. I watched Kesha screaming my name as they put her in handcuffs. I pressed the call button for the elevator. The door slid open. I stepped inside. I did not look back. I did not need to. I knew what ruin looked like. I had seen plenty of buildings collapse in my time, and this one was coming down beautifully. The restaurant erupted into a chaotic symphony of shouting and shattered glass as the tactical team swarmed the room. It was a scene of absolute pandemonium set against the backdrop of a quiet Chicago skyline. The diners who had been whispering about my appearance moments ago were now scrambling under their tables, shielding their heads with linen napkins. The FBI agents moved with a precision that was terrifying to behold. They did not scream. They did not hesitate. They flowed around the tables like water, cutting off every exit, securing every angle. The two enforcers from Shadow Creek, the men who had been moments away from carving Brad up like a holiday turkey, tried to fight. It was a mistake born of instinct rather than logic. The bald man swung a heavy fist at the first agent who approached him. The agent ducked under the blow and drove a taser into the man's midsection. The sound of the electric discharge was a sharp crack, followed by the heavy thud of 300 lb of muscle hitting the floor. The scarred man raised his hands instantly, dropping the jagged champagne bottle. He knew when the odds were beat. He was shoved against the wall, his face pressed into the expensive silk wallpaper as cuffs were slapped onto his wrists. Brad was a different story. He was not a fighter. He was a rat. When the shouting started, he had tried to scramble under the table, seeking shelter beneath the tablecloth stained with his own blood and spilled wine. I watched as two officers grabbed him by his ankles and dragged him out. He was kicking and screaming, his tuxedo jacket riding up to his armpits, his dignity completely gone. "Do not touch me. I am a victim here. Those men were going to kill me. Shut your mouth." The lead agent barked. He hauled Brad to his feet. Brad's legs were jelly. He could barely stand. He looked at me, his eyes wide with a desperate, pleading madness. "Malik, tell them. Tell them I am family. Tell them this is a misunderstanding." I stood by the elevator, my hands calmly at my sides. I watched the spectacle with the detached interest of a building inspector looking at a structure that had failed its safety audit. I did not say a word. I did not need to. The evidence was speaking for me. The room smelled of fear. It is a specific scent, sharp and metallic, cutting through the aroma of lobster and steak. Brad smelled like it. He was sweating profusely, his expensive hair product running down his forehead into his eyes. Officer Brad stammered, looking at the badge on the man's chest. "You do not understand. My father-in-law, he is senile. He gets confused. He gave me that card. He told me to use it." The agent ignored him. He spun Brad around and slammed him against the pillar. He kicked Brad's legs apart. He patted him down, finding the wallet in his back pocket. He pulled out my driver's license and my social security card. "Is your name Malik Jefferson?" the agent asked, holding up my ID. "No, but he gave it to me for safekeeping." Brad lied. He forgets things. The agent passed the ID to another officer and pulled a pair of steel handcuffs from his belt. The sound of them ratcheting tight around Brad's wrists was the sweetest music I had heard in years. It was the sound of consequences arriving. Bradley Miller, the agent, set his voice a monotone drone that carried the weight of the federal government. "You are under arrest." For what? Brad shrieked, using a credit card. "It is a misunderstanding. I will pay it back." The agent spun him around so they were face to face. He pulled a folded document from his jacket pocket. It was a warrant. "You are under arrest for 18 counts of wire fraud, 12 counts of aggravated identity theft, bank fraud, and interstate transportation of stolen goods." "That is ridiculous," Brad spat. "I did not steal anything." The agent continued as if Brad had not spoken. You are also being charged under Illinois state law for forgery of a legal document regarding the sale of the property at 4215 Martin Luther King Drive. We have the forensic analysis of the signature. It is a match for your wife's handwriting. Authorized by a fraudulent power of attorney that you conspired to use. Brad went pale. He looked at Keisha, who was standing frozen near the window, surrounded by 2 female officers. She did that, Brad shouted. She signed it, not me. It was her idea. The betrayal was immediate. The rat was eating its own tail. And the agent said, raising his voice to cut off Brad's cowardly deflection. There is one more charge, the most serious one. He reached into a file folder held by another officer. He pulled out a photograph. It was a glossy 8x10 print. It was the photo I had taken in the basement. The photo of my face covered in blood. The photo of the gash on my temple. You are charged with aggravated battery of a senior citizen and elder abuse. Brad stared at the photo. His mouth opened and closed. I did not mean to, he whispered. He fell. He tripped. We have the audio recording, the agent said. We have a recording of you demanding the watch. We have a recording of the struggle. We have a recording of you laughing about his injury afterward. We have you, Brad, dead to rights. Brad looked at me across the room. He saw the bandage on my head. He saw the way I was looking at him, not with anger, not with hate, but with the cold indifference of a judge passing a sentence. You set me up, he hissed. You planned this. I did not plan for you to push me, Brad, I said quietly. You did that all on your own. You chose violence because you are weak. The agent signaled to his men, get him out of here. They dragged Brad toward the service elevator. He was weeping now. Big, heaving sobs that shook his whole body. He was begging for a lawyer. He was begging for a deal. He was begging for mercy from a system that had none for men like him. As they hauled him away, the room turned its attention to Keisha. She was standing by the window, clutching her diamond necklace as if it were a rosary. Her face was streaked with mascara. She looked small. She looked young. For a fleeting second, I saw the little girl I used to push on the swings in the park. The little girl who used to bring me lemonade when I was working in the yard. But that little girl was gone. She had been replaced by a woman who had signed her name on a document to sell my home. A woman who had watched her husband shove me and done nothing. The female officer stepped forward. She did not handle Keisha roughly, but she was firm. Keisha Jefferson, she said. Keisha looked at me. Her eyes were wide pools of panic. Dad, she whimpered. Dad, tell them. Tell them I did not know. I stood still. The silence stretched between us. The officer took Keisha's wrist. She pulled her arms behind her back. You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud, forgery, and identity theft. No, Keisha screamed. She tried to pull away. No, please. I am pregnant. You cannot arrest me. The officer paused. She looked at Keisha's stomach. Are you pregnant, ma'am? We are trying. Keisha lied. We were going to start a family in the Maldives. Please do not do this. My father will explain. He will drop the charges. She looked at me. She was begging. Dad, stop them. I am your daughter. I am your only child. You cannot let them take me to jail. I looked at the handcuffs clicking around her wrists. I looked at the stolen dress she was wearing. I looked at the ring on her finger that was bought with my credit. I walked toward her. The officers let me approach. I stopped 2 feet away. Dad, she cried, relief flooding her face. Thank God. Tell them. I looked her in the eye. You signed the deed, Keisha. She flinched. Brad made me. He said we had no choice. You signed the checks from my retirement account. He told me to. You watched him push me down the stairs in the basement. You watched me bleed and you walked away and locked the door. Keisha stopped crying. She looked at the floor. I was scared, Dad. No, you were not, I said softly. You were impatient. You were greedy. You wanted the money. And you did not care if you had to step over my body to get it. Dad, please. I am sorry. I am so sorry. I reached into my pocket. I pulled out a small folded piece of paper. It was the note she had left on the kitchen counter the day she sold the house, the one that said she was going out for groceries when she was actually at the notary office signing away my life. I tucked the paper into the neckline of her stolen dress. You are not sorry you did it, Keisha. You are sorry you got caught. I signaled to the officer. Take her. No, Keisha screamed. She lunged toward me, but the officer held her back. Daddy, do not leave me. I will die in there. I cannot go to prison. I am not like them. I turned my back on her. It was the hardest thing I had ever done. Every instinct in my body, every biological imperative as a father screamed at me to turn around, to protect her, to fix it. That is what I had done her whole life. I had fixed her scraped knees. I had fixed her bad grades. I had fixed her car wrecks, but I could not fix her soul, and I could not fix this. I walked toward the elevator. Her screams followed me. They echoed off the glass walls of the restaurant. Daddy, please. I love you. I pressed the call button. I stared at the numbers lighting up above the door. 9495. The door slid open. I stepped inside. Desmond was standing there in the lobby waiting for me. He saw my face. He saw the blood on the bandage. He saw the look in my eyes. He did not ask if I was okay. He knew the answer. Is it done? He asked. It is done, I said. The doors began to close. I saw Keisha one last time through the narrowing gap. She was being led away, her head hanging low, her shoulders shaking. She looked like a broken doll. The door shut with a final thud. The sound of her crying was cut off instantly, replaced by the hum of the elevator motor. I was alone in the steel box descending 95 floors back to the earth. I leaned my head against the cool metal wall. I felt the vibration of the cables. I had my money. I had my house back. I had justice. But as the numbers ticked down floor by floor, I realized I had paid a price higher than any of the ones Brad had racked up on my card. I had paid with my family, and there was no refund for that. The winter winds of Chicago had finally retreated, replacing the biting cold with the gentle warmth of a late spring afternoon. I stood on the sidewalk looking up at the house at 4215 Martin Luther King Drive. The yellow stop work order was gone. The broken window where the excavator had smashed through was repaired with custom glass that matched the original 1920 specifications. The scent of fresh paint and wet soil filled the air. It smelled like renewal. It smelled like victory. It had taken 6 months of legal warfare to get here. When the FBI raided the restaurant, the fallout was immediate, but the cleanup was messy. Shadow Creek LLC tried to put a lien on the property, claiming they were victims of fraud entitled to compensation. The city had fines pending for the landmark violations. It was a tangled knot of liability that would have choked a lesser man. But I was not a lesser man, and I had Desmond Clark. We did not fight them with fists. We fought them with the checkbook of the Malik Jefferson Trust. We bought out the bad debt Shadow Creek held over the property for pennies on the dollar because they were terrified of the federal investigation Brad had brought to their doorstep. We paid the city fines. We cleared the title. It cost a significant portion of the liquid cash in the trust, but money is a renewable resource. Dignity is not. I walked up the steps to the porch. I ran my hand along the railing. I had sanded and refinished it myself over the last few weeks. The wood felt warm and solid under my palm. I sat down on the new rocking chair I had bought. It was teak sturdy and built to last. I looked out over the neighborhood. The sun was setting, casting long golden shadows across the street. I was back. I was in my home, and this time no one was going to take it from me. A black Mercedes pulled up to the curb. It was not the Maybach this time, but a sleek S-Class. Desmond Clark stepped out. He was carrying a leather portfolio, and he looked tired but satisfied. He walked up the path and sat in the chair next to me. "Good evening, Malik." "Good evening, Desmond. You look like a man who just finished a marathon." "I feel like it," Desmond said, loosening his tie. "But the race is over. The races. The judge banged the gavel an hour ago." I rocked slowly in my chair. I looked at the oak tree in the front yard. I did not look at Desmond. "Tell me." Desmond opened the portfolio. He pulled out a sheath of papers stamped with the seal of the federal court. Bradley Miller pleaded guilty to all charges to avoid a life sentence. The judge was not lenient. He cited the vulnerability of the victim and the premeditated nature of the financial crimes. Brad got 12 years in federal prison. No parole. He will be nearly 50 when he gets out. 12 years. It was a lifetime. It was enough time for him to think about every dollar he stole and every lie he told. "And Keisha?" I asked. My voice remained steady, but my heart gave a small, painful thump against my ribs. Desmond sighed. He knew this was the part that hurt. Keisha's lawyer tried to argue coercion. She tried to say Brad forced her into everything. But the forensic evidence on the power of attorney and her signature on the checks told a different story. The judge gave her 4 years. She will be eligible for supervised release in 2. 4 years. My daughter was going to prison for 4 years. I thought about the little girl who used to run down these stairs on Christmas morning. I thought about the woman who had looked me in the eye and lied about selling my home. "It is fair," I said. "It is justice," Desmond corrected. "They destroyed their own lives, Malik. You just survived the wreckage." He reached into the portfolio again. "There is one more thing, the custody hearing." I stopped rocking. I turned to look at him. "Social services completed their background check on you. They reviewed the financials of the trust. They interviewed the neighbors. They saw the restoration of the house." And Desmond smiled. He handed me a document with a gold seal. "You have full legal guardianship. He is yours, Malik. I took the paper. I took thee." It was an order of custody for Leo, my 7-year-old grandson, Kesha's son from her first marriage. The boy had been living with his father's sister in Ohio since the arrest, but she could not afford to keep him. He was the innocent victim in all of this. The collateral damage of his mother's greed. "He arrives tomorrow," Desmond said. I arranged the transport. I looked at the paper. I looked at the name. Leo Jefferson. He carried my name. He carried my blood. "Thank you, Desmond," I said. Desmond stood up. He buttoned his jacket. "You are a good man, Malik. Most people would have walked away. You stayed and you fought." "I did not fight for me," I said. "I fought for the foundation. You cannot build a future on lies. Now I have a chance to build it right." Desmond nodded and walked back to his car. I watched him drive away. I was alone on the porch, but the silence did not feel empty anymore. It felt pregnant with possibility. The next afternoon, the house was filled with a sound I had not heard in 20 years. The sound of a child running. Leo was small for his age, with big eyes that had seen too much confusion in the last 6 months. He ran around the living room, touching the walls, looking at the furniture. He had his mother's smile, but he had my spirit. "Grandpa, is this really your house?" he asked, stopping in front of the fireplace. "It is our house, Leo," I said. He looked at me. "Mom said you were homeless. She said you lived in a basement." I walked over to him. I knelt down so I was eye level with him. I was 70 years old, but my knees did not hurt today. "Your mother was confused, Leo? I lived in a basement for a little while because I had to fix a big problem. But the problem is fixed now, and we are never going back to the basement. Are Mom and Brad coming back?" "No, Leo, not for a long time." He did not cry. He just nodded as if he understood that some people just disappear. "Can I play in the yard?" "Yes." Go play." He ran out the front door. I walked out to the porch and sat back in my rocking chair. I watched him run circles around the oak tree. I watched him laugh at a squirrel. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my smartphone. Not the BlackBerry, the regular one, the one Brad had taken from me and the police had returned. I opened the contacts. I scrolled down to Keisha. I looked at the number. I thought about the 4 years she was facing. I thought about the letters she had sent me from the county jail, letters begging for money for the commissary, letters blaming Brad, letters that never once said, "I am sorry for hurting you, Dad." She had not learned, not yet. Maybe in 4 years she would, maybe she never would. But my job was not to wait for her to learn. My job was to protect Leo. My job was to make sure the next generation of Jeffersons understood the value of $1 and the value of a name. I pressed the edit button. I scrolled down to the bottom of the screen, delete contact. My thumb hovered over the red text. I took a deep breath. I smelled the fresh cut grass. I heard Leo laughing. I pressed it. The name disappeared. I put the phone on the small table beside me. I picked up my cup of tea. It was Earl Grey, hot and sweet. I took a sip. I felt the warmth spread through my chest. I looked at the sun dipping below the horizon, painting the Chicago sky in shades of purple and orange. I looked at my house standing strong and solid against the coming night. I was 70 years old. I had lost a daughter. I had been beaten, robbed, and humiliated. But I was still standing. I was still the general contractor of my own life. I watched Leo pick up a stick and pretend it was a sword, fighting invisible dragons in the yard. "You get them, Leo," I whispered. I leaned back and closed my eyes, listening to the city breathe. People say life ends when you get old. They say you become invisible. They say you are finished. But they are wrong. I smiled. Life begins at 70, and I had a lot of work to do. I spent 40 years building skyscrapers, but the hardest thing I ever had to build was my own self-respect. I learned the hard way that kindness without boundaries is just self-destruction. You cannot save people who are determined to drown, especially when they are trying to use you as their life raft. Real family is not defined by DNA. It is defined by loyalty, mutual respect, and love that doesn't cost your dignity. If you are giving everything to people who give you nothing but pain, remember this. Walking away is not an act of cruelty, it is an act of survival. You are never too old to pour a new foundation. If you enjoyed this story of justice, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more. And tell me in the comments below, have you ever had to cut off a toxic family member to protect your own peace?